Chapter 105. Excited, Yun-yang checked carefully and realized that the Lightning Cat, Whitey 5, had broken through the Lightning Cat clan's level shackles, becoming the first Lightning Cat in Tianxian continent's history to break through to the 4th level. It was 4th level pinnacle. It was only a step away from breaking through to the 5th level. Yun-yang's eyes almost popped out of his head at the sight of the Eclipse Panther's advancement. Eclipse Panthers, 9th level beginner mystical beasts. This was clearly recorded in the illustrated history of the strange beasts of the mountains and seas. There was no mistake about it. However, if the 3 beasts in his house continued to grow at a normal rate, they would at least reach the level of a 9th level Xian beast. Not to mention, the Eclipse Panther's ability had already soared to the 5th level intermediate standard. This furry little ball-like creature already possessed a terrifying lethality. Yun-yang could not help but feel more confident at this current situation. A fox borrowing the tiger's might? A man borrowing the beast's might? The surprises did not stop there, they came one after another. In the yard, Fang Mafei and Lao Mei's faces were filled with excitement. "How about you?" Fang Mafei asked. "How about you?" Lao Mei was so excited that he was gloating. "I'm at the 7th peak pinnacle now. I can step into the 8th peak anytime." Fang Mafei was so excited that his tongue was trembling. "I'm finally at the 7th peak." Lao Mei was beyond excited. "I feel like I'm dreaming these days. If this goes on, I can challenge Dugu Cho next year, tisk." Fang Mafei gave him the middle finger. "Challenge Dugu Cho? Don't you think you're thinking too much, brother?" When Yun-yang walked out, both of them went up to him. "Young master, I have good news." "Ah. Young master, you've broken through too?" Yun-yang rolled his eyes. This is really a blessed land of feng shui. Fang Mafei felt that the Yun residence's feng shui was too good. "I'm hungry." Yun-yang's stomach rumbled. "It's already done." Lao Mei winked proudly as the 3 men, 3 panthers, and a cat walked towards the dining hall. The mystical beast meat was still piled up like a mountain. However, Yun-yang, the glutton, felt nauseous at the sight of the mountain of fat. He felt full even before he had eaten. He sighed and sat down to eat. Lao Mei and Fang Mafei had already started wolfing down the food. It couldn't be helped. Eating with the young master was the best way to get food. If he didn't snatch it, he would really starve. But this time, the 2 of them each ate a kilogram of meat before they realized, this time, Yun-yang had only eaten a bowl of porridge, less than half a caddy of mystical beast meat and 2 slices of fruit. Then, he wiped his hands and mouth and stopped eating. Is he not eating anymore? Lao Mei was so shocked that he dropped the piece of bone he was chewing on. "Young master, you're full." "I'm full." Yun-yang looked at Lao Mei strangely. He had not realized it, but his eyes widened abruptly. "I'm full?" Fang Mafei and Lao Mei lowered their heads simultaneously. "I'm actually full." Yun-yang continued to be surprised. "How much have I eaten?" "You're full." Both of them were exasperated. Yun-yang, who had checked his condition, went out to practice his martial arts. Only then did he return with a face full of joy. "Ha ha ha. I'm full. Ha ha ha. I'm full. This young master is blessed by the heavens, I'm actually full today." If others had heard this, they might have thought that this fellow had been starving for many years. Who would have known that Yun-yang was actually bursting with contentment? Ever since he was injured, he had developed a problem of gluttony. After breaking through to the 2nd stage of the endless divine art, he had actually recovered so mysteriously. While confirming that his gluttonous habit had been cured, Yun-yang realized something else that surprised him. The fact that his endless divine art could attract mystical beasts could be concealed as long as he did not purposely use his cultivation method to stir up trouble. This situation made Yun Yang heave a huge sigh of relief. It was finally over. Carrying such an uncontrollable superpower was really a source of trouble. There was another thing that surprised Yun Yang. Towering Wind Pavilion was closed. Everyone inside, along with Shui Wuyin, had disappeared without a trace. Shui Wuyin had said that he was leaving. Had he gone home? However, Yun Yang had a feeling that there was a reason for this. He seemed to feel the two pairs of eyes that were staring at him, filled with endless suspicion. Yun Yang had a feeling that Shui Wuyin would never disappear, nor would he leave. He had probably been waiting for his next move. It looked like he had to explain it clearly when they met again. Otherwise, this would be a huge misunderstanding. However, how was he going to explain it? Once he tried to explain, it would involve everything. Even Yun Yang felt a headache coming on. Tiantang City had been unusually quiet for more than 10 days, so quiet that Yun Yang was not used to it. No one from Cirrus House was looking for trouble. The Board of Justice was still in a terrible predicament, searching for clues but to no avail. The three noble families had finally stopped making a fuss in the Board of Justice, but it was a matter of opinion as to how angry they were. They had begun to wreak havoc in the residence of Crown Prince. Hand over Shui Yuehan. Where could the Crown Prince go to hand over Shui Yuehan? They were truly in a terrible predicament. Encountering these three fellows who were relentless, unreasonable, and unscrupulous, it was a huge headache. All in all, the capital seemed to have returned to its usual state. However, Yun Yang could feel the prelude of a storm. The undercurrents of the past had all disappeared in an instant. Yun Yang had secretly activated the Nine Heavens Dictum's men to pay attention to these movements but to no avail. This is not a good thing. Yun Yang's vigilance had risen to the highest point. There must be something wrong when something was out of the ordinary. It's probably because the act of Shui Yuehan and Fu Guansan escaping from the prison was too obvious. The Four Seasons Tower must be investigating this as well. Although they can't be sure where Shui Yuehan has gone to, they have a better understanding of Shui Yuehan's background, so they'll realize it one day. Besides, they won't give up on the matter here. Yun Yang thought to himself, as long as there are still people from the Nine Supremes alive, as long as there's a possibility that they're still alive, they'll never give up. Other than dealing with the Four Seasons Tower's reaction, Yun Yang had another matter to attend to. Tai Zheng had returned. The first thing this legendary marshal had done after defending the Fortress of Resilience and rebuilding it was to cause a great disaster. Tai Zheng had massacred the residents of East Defense's men until their blood flowed like a river. The reason was treason. The incident had stirred up an uproar. In the end, it was suppressed by the alliance of His Majesty the Emperor and a few highly respected elders. There was a reason why Tai Zheng would do so, or rather, he dared to do so. As a famed general, his retreat had been ambushed during the battle and he was completely defenseless. To Tai Zheng, this was no doubt a great humiliation. Even though the opponent was Han Sanhe, Tai Zheng would not admit defeat. He was not that stupid. Therefore, after the battle, Tai Zheng's meticulous investigation finally found out that the incident was related to the residents of East Defense. Tai Zheng had his reasons but he had no evidence, at least no concrete evidence. Actually, it was normal that he had no evidence. Since the other party had decided to do something that was no different from treason, there would not be any evidence left behind. Therefore, Tai Zheng had raised his butcher's knife after half a month of hesitation and helplessness. He might as well not argue with reason and be unreasonable for once. Even if I have my head chopped off, I won't let a traitor like this live. The residents of East Defense was massacred. Once the news spread, the censors and censors went wild with accusations, even His Majesty the Emperor was troubled. Why did you kill so many officials of the imperial court? Because they betrayed the country. Do you have evidence? Is the evidence irrefutable? No. If you don't, then you're a traitor, acting recklessly, deceiving the emperor and ignoring the nation's law. You've committed a heinous crime. I have evidence. What evidence? When Han Sanhe was fighting me, he could actually send his army to ambush my retreat and the point of entry was precise. It's impossible if there wasn't a traitor. What kind of evidence is this? This is just your speculation. This is irrefutable evidence. You're being unreasonable. This is the evidence. Indeed, in the eyes of the military, this matter was irrefutable evidence. Irrefutable evidence. In terms of war, it was still understandable if the infantry had ambushed their retreat. After all, the infantry had many ways to break up and sneak in before quickly regrouping. They could even disguise themselves. Now, however, their retreat had been ambushed by 30,000 cavalrymen. That was an absurd claim. Even a deputy general would not commit such an idiotic mistake, let alone a famous general like Tai Zheng. There must be a reason for it to happen. If they found out that this matter was related to the residents of East Defense, then it was definitely related. In other words, the massacre this time was definitely not a mistake. Even old Marshal Qiu Jianhan and Leng Daoyin dared to use their heads as a guarantee. However, in the eyes of the government, the military was obviously finding excuses for their own failure. Without evidence, how dare you kill so brazenly? Just based on your empty words and white teeth to make a guarantee, that's enough? Do you think it's over? Then we'll call you traitors. What then? Because of this, the entire imperial court of Yutong was in an uproar. Both the military and the government had almost rolled up their sleeves to fight in court. After a bout of bickering, the matter finally came to an end. The military, of course, wanted to protect Tai Zheng. His Majesty the Emperor did not intend to do anything to Tai Zheng. After all, he had just made a great contribution. Most importantly, the military did not think that Tai Zheng's actions were wrong. The government was extremely disgusted by this and retorted. That was why there were so many bickering. His Majesty the Emperor, who was caught in the middle, had fined Tai Zheng 2 years of his salary to end the matter. Indeed, Tai Zheng was punished. This was something the government was happy to see. At least, he was not completely unpunished. Tai Zheng was not convicted, he was only fined. It was as if he was innocent, this was the military's understanding. Now, this menace was finally coming back. He was coming back to get married. On my wedding day, all my brothers, dead or alive, shall have a goblet of wedding wine. These were Tai Zheng's exact words. On the day the war ended, Tai Zheng had made his vow. I don't have the money, I can't have a pot for everyone but a goblet for everyone, I'll do it even if I have to go bankrupt. Even if I have to repay my debt for the rest of my life for this wedding wine, this goblet of wine must be toasted. Tai Zheng's words echoed throughout the entire empire of Yutong. Forget about the armies from the south, and north, just Tai Zheng's eastern army alone had a headcount of 500,000. If the brothers who had died in battle, the remaining troops who had participated in the war, the logistical support, the transportation of supplies. Chapter 106. What kind of number was 3 million cups of wine? What kind of concept was 3 million cups of wine? Let's put it this way. As a marshal, the wedding wine for Tai Zheng's wedding banquet could not be the kind that cost a dozen copper coins a caddy, it had to be at least 10 silver taels a caddy. It had to be even more expensive. Even if it was the cheapest kind of wine that cost 10 taels per caddy, it would cost at least 1 million caddies of wine to make 3 cups of wine per caddy. In other words, disregarding all other expenses, just the wine alone would cost at least 10 million taels of silver. Based on Tai Zheng's salary alone, he could never repay this amount even if he had 10 lifetimes. However, he had still made this promise and was going to fulfill it on time. Tai Zheng was sprinting all the way. He could feel that his state of mind had undergone a huge change compared to when he had set off for the war. Now, Tai Zheng felt that everyone from the Empire of Yutong was so adorable and amiable. Along the way, he had met countless people who had come to offer him money. Mere gold and silver to buy the marshal's wedding wine. "Marshal, please do me the honor and accept it." However, Tai Zheng did not accept any of them, rejecting all of them. He knew that his promise was impulsive, extremely foolish even. All his brothers in the world were probably worried about him now. However, he would rather die of poverty and be shackled by debts that he could never repay in his lifetime than to accept these brothers' money. "It's my business to treat all of you to wine at my wedding. Would I still be Tai Zheng if I were to spend your money to treat my guests? When I go back, I'll sell the 2 manors that His Majesty has bestowed me. They can be sold for about 3 million taels. If I sell all the soft gems and treasures at home and the rewards that I've received all these years, they can be sold for another 2 million taels. There's also the savings that I've accumulated over the years. Some of the private goods that I've looted during the war that I haven't turned in yet, there's about 300,000 to 400,000 taels. If I sell the fief of my title, it can be sold for 2,700,000 taels. Then, I'll have 8 million taels. Tai Zheng calculated in his heart. What's left is probably only a gap of 3 million taels. I'll borrow from old Marshal and Marshal Qiu, and the generals from the Board of War will gather some. That should be enough. No matter what, I must let my brothers drink this wedding wine. Be it those who are still alive or those who have died in battle. This is the wine that I, Tai Zheng, owe everyone. It's also the wine that my brothers deserve to drink. His Majesty wants to pay for it, but we can't. The national treasury is already empty. I still have some money, but I still have to pay the pensions of my brothers. I can't use this money to drink. I, Tai Zheng, can still afford to treat you to this wine." The 36 guards by his side were also discussing in secret. "How much can you gather?" "Less than 10,000. I will think of a way to get to 10,000. I will definitely get to 10,000. My family is rich. I can take out 100,000. If I clench my teeth and squeeze, I can take out 120,000. I'm sure that's the amount. I'm ashamed. All these years, I've thrown everything away. I only have 100 silver taels on me now. I'll think of a way to borrow some money from someone. Is it possible for me to gather 5,000 silver taels? Damn you, Wu Lauer, you actually don't save up money at such a crucial time. I'm even poorer than second brother Wu here. Out of the 36 guards, 27 of them were paupers. They were truly powerless even though they had the heart. For a moment, the brothers looked at each other. The captain scolded them exasperatedly, "You bunch of bastards, you're all king rich all the time. Why are all of you so cowardly when it comes to serious matters?" 27 of them hung their heads low, their faces full of misery. It was true that a single copper coin could bring down a hero, the saying did not lie. It's mainly because we're at war every day. There are 27 of us, we don't have wives or children. Both our parents are dead, there's no one at home. What do we need money for? We can't wait to spend it all in the afternoon if we have the money this morning. What if we die one day and we don't have the money to spend? How pitiful would that be? I didn't spend it indiscriminately, but once I got the money, I quickly gave it to the families of my fallen brothers. Who would have thought that this would happen? The brothers looked at each other and heaved a long sigh. No matter what, the marshal is getting married. The wedding banquet must be done beautifully. Ostentatious. The captain's eyes were red. Why don't all of you rob the rich to give to the poor? They were really desperate now, to the point of robbing the rich to give to the poor. No one is allowed to go. Tai Zheng's voice was forced to be cold. All of you have fought so hard to keep your lives on the battlefield, yet you can't wait to throw your lives away. No one needs to say anything. Your father has money. A wedding banquet won't make your father poor. Keep your money. Those who don't have a wife, find a wife quickly, keep your roots. Tai Zheng's expression was dark. Why are you spending it on your father? Even if your father is in debt, I'm still a man with a wife. You bunch of single dogs, don't get involved. How could the 36 personal guards not know their own great general's family background? They all lowered their heads and were dispirited and dispirited. What are you guys pretending to be? Tiantang City is right in front of us. Tai Zheng warned in a low voice, we're the meritorious officials, we're the heroes. All of you, show me your vigor. Look at all of you looking so unlucky. The 36 men answered and rubbed their faces with their hands, rubbing them until they glowed and looked refreshed. He then tidied up his clothes and even brushed his warhorse. Only then did he gallop forward valiantly and energetically. They had just passed by a forest. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew. A gust of wind blew, and countless leaves rustled, forming a long dragon in front of the cavalry. Stop! Tai Zheng reined in his horse, the 36 men behind him stopped at the same time. A voice came from the forest, Marshal Tai, since you're here, why don't we have a chat in the forest? The voice was gentle and elegant. Tai Zheng said, who are you? Since you wish to meet me, why do you have to hide like this? The voice replied, don't worry, we're friends. Friends? Tai Zheng sneered. Why don't I remember having such a shameful friend like you? As he spoke, his hand was already gripping the hilt of his sword. Behind him, the 36 cavalrymen had their sabers in their hands, their arrows nocked. The person in the forest was silent for a moment before he said, it's fine if you don't come in. Suddenly, a bundle fell to the ground with a thud. The gentle voice said, Marshal Tai, this is my family's Supreme Lord's wedding gift to Marshal Tai. Before the words could echo in the air, the silhouette on the other side had already disappeared without a trace. Wedding gift? Tai Zheng looked at the red bundle on the road, his gaze suspicious. He urged his horse over and carefully flipped through the bundle with his 25-feet-long spear. In the next moment, Tai Zheng's face was flushed, his entire body trembling with excitement as he sprung up and called out loudly, Your Honor! Stay! Brother! Brother, stay! However, no one in the forest answered him. Tai Zheng leaped into the forest with a swoosh, not caring if there was an ambush in the forest at this moment. He made a few rounds in the forest and only saw a rock in the middle that was clean, as if someone had just sat on it. Tai Zheng walked over in agitation, only to see a piece of paper pressed on the rock with a sentence written on it. Congratulations to Brother Tai for your wedding. May you live in bliss for 100 years and have a son soon. The wedding wine is on me. It was a short sentence. However, there was a signature of a ball of flame. 9 stars surround and guard, the flame burns. At this moment, Tai Zheng was shaking from head to toe, the regret he felt was indescribable and overwhelming. Why didn't he come in just now? Why was he so paranoid? Marshal! The captain of the Janissaries rushed in hastily. Marshal, there are 12 million silver taels in this bundle. He was agitated, excited, and sighing. His own family knew him best. With the marshal's temper, he would never accept such a large sum of money that had fallen out of nowhere. Accept it. Tai Zheng exhaled in exasperation. Yes, I will send it back now. Huh? The captain's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Accept it? F***ck, did the marshal say it wrongly or did I hear it wrongly? We brothers have sincerely contributed money to the marshal but were rejected by the marshal. Why did he accept it now? What happened to family, what happened to brothers? Was the little boat of brothers going to capsize? This is the wedding gift from the 9 lords. He said that he will pay for the wedding wine. Tai Zheng smiled bitterly. I can reject the world, reject His Majesty, but, the 9 lords' money, I can't. His words made the captain of the Janissaries tremble in agitation. 9 lords. Chapter 107. Tai Zheng's wedding was being prepared in full swing. This wedding had become the biggest event of the nation's military. No one had expected that a general's wedding would become a wedding without precedent in the Empire of Yutong because of a seemingly absurd and idiotic promise. No wedding could be grander than this one. There was no other wedding that was more burdened than Tai Zheng's wedding. The 20th of October. Tai Zheng's wedding. There were still 2.5 months from now, but this impending wedding had shaken the entire continent. All the brothers who were alive and those who had died in the war were celebrating and drinking together. The entire Empire of Yutong's military felt their backs straighter as they walked on the streets. Not only the Empire of Yutong, this news made all the soldiers in the eastern continent feel their blood boiling. Daiyuan, Tianxi, and the other empires' board of war and generals had sent letters of request. Can the enemies of the battlefield have a drink? Even the Empire of Dongxuan's board of war, which had just fought a war, had Han San's handwritten letter sent from miles away. Congratulations to the soldiers. Can the general's wedding have a drink? The Empire of Yutong's imperial court was in a heated debate regarding this matter. The civil officials' understanding was that Tai Zheng was playing to the gallery, creating trouble out of nothing to buy people's hearts. Look, even the enemy's generals wanted to have a drink. What was this all about? Many of the more observant people were even more certain that the drinking was an excuse and that the real motive was to spy on the military. Since there were such concerns, this absurd farce should be stopped. At the very least, people from other countries should be prevented from participating. Unexpectedly, the Empire of Yutong's emperor, Yupeiza, was exceptionally tough this time, going against the majority's wishes and issuing a letter of credence of peace. 7 heroes of 5 empires, no war before the new year. Gentlemen's agreement, there is wine in peace. Can we sign it? The emperors of the empires responded immediately to the letter of credence. No war before the new year. The letter of credence of peace was announced to the world. The people of the entire eastern continent knew about it. All the famed generals of the entire eastern continent would gather in Tiantang City to attend Tai Zheng's wedding and drink a cup of brotherhood wine together. However, time was running out. After all, there were only 2.5 months left. Tiantang City was bustling with activity. Some of the generals who had a long journey had already started to depart from their respective countries. Not for anything else, but for his brothers on the battlefield. Regardless of friend or foe, they were all heroic souls. It was the common wish of all soldiers to invite their fallen brothers to their wedding. However, this wish was an extravagant hope. At least in his own country, this wish could not be fulfilled. There was no need to talk about ordinary generals, and it was even more impossible to mess with high-ranking generals. Even if he wanted to do it, the sovereign would be suspicious. You invited so many people to your wedding, what are you trying to do by doing such a thing? Win the hearts of the people? His achievements were already enough to shock the Lord. If he were to do something like this, his head would truly roll on the ground. It would be a lifelong regret if he couldn't do it himself. However, since someone else was doing it, this rare opportunity finally presented itself. Then, no matter how far away he was, even if it was an enemy country, he would do it. I want to go too. Many generals felt their blood boiling. I'm going to ask for a cup of wine for my fallen brothers. Even if it was the enemy's wedding wine, this cup of wine belonged to the soldiers of the world. Even if I die in Yutong because of this, it's worth it to be able to drink this wine. No one would have thought that what seemed like a farce in the eyes of the literati, a mere soldier's wedding, would actually become a grand event attended by the entire continent's military. It was unprecedentedly grand, a grand event of the military. No, not only was this grand and unprecedented, it would be difficult for anyone to compare to it in the future. Yunyang sat quietly under the flower canopy, paying attention to the information coming from all directions. He was not confident in the enemy's inexplicable hibernation. They had actually retreated after missing their target. This was not in line with the Four Seasons Towers style. However, Yunyang also believed that if the enemy were to strike again, it would be a thunderous blow. The enemy could already confirm that there were still people alive in the Nine Supremes. As long as there were still people alive in the Nine Supremes, the enemy would never give up. In the future, they would only employ a more rigorous and terrifying plan to target them. The forces of the four noble families of North, South, East, and West had left Tiantang City quietly. In spite of this, the four noble young masters of spring, summer, autumn, and winter insisted on staying in Tiantang City. Other than finding trouble with the Crown Prince's residence, they often gathered at Cirrus' house. Qiu Yunsan had also been released from his house arrest and joined in. He was brutally beaten by Dong Tianling, who pointed at his nose and warned, "I'll skin you alive if you dare to hit on my sister again." Qiu Yunsan was as docile as a child. "Of course. I wouldn't dare even if you begged me to hit on her. I'm still limping now." "Oh, that beating." Qiu Yunsan shuddered at the thought of it, fear creeping onto his face. "Have you seen a rainstorm before?" The other three popinjays laughed, taking pleasure in his misfortune. "Oh right, Dong Tianling, where's the fellow who was with you that day?" Chun Wanfeng fanned himself with a green fan. If it were not for the green bamboo branch on his head, he would have looked rather elegant. "Why haven't I seen him for a few days?" "What fellow?" Dong Tianling said unhappily, "That's my boss." "Your boss?" The three popinjays exclaimed at the same time. Dong Tianling was instantly alerted, realizing that he had let the cat out of the bag. He quickly corrected himself, "Yes, my boss doesn't know him." Yes, that's right. We understand you." The three popinjays nodded solemnly. On the other side, Yun Zuyu was smiling. With Yun Zuyu's knowledge, how could she not see that these fellows were the amulets that Yunyang had found for her? With these fellows here, it was basically equivalent to the four noble families holding the fort here. Who would dare to provoke such a force? Yunyang had put in a lot of effort for her sake. Therefore, Yun Zuyu blended in with these four fellows without hesitation, calling them brothers. She would drink and have fun for free. This action made Dong Tianling and the rest feel flattered. While they felt honored, they were also ashamed, feeling that they owed this new sister too much. Now, hearing Dong Tianling and the rest talk about Yunyang, Yun Zuyu's eyes darted around and said, "Young Master Chun is right. Young Master Yun hasn't come for many days. However, this is normal. He rarely comes in the past. After all, he's the young master of Marquis Yun's family, he must be very busy." The young master of Marquis Yun's family. Qiu Yunsan, Xia Bingchuan, and Chun Wanfeng's eyes shone. Dong Tianling looked bitter. He did not expect Yun Zuyu to reveal Yunyang's identity just like that. He could no longer hide it. There was a 99% chance that he would not be able to enjoy the benefits alone. What should he do? Dong Tianling's eyes darted around as he thought of a countermeasure. Chun, Xia, and Qiu's eyes darted around as well, thinking that the mysterious person who had secretly helped Dong Tianling must be this young Master Yunyang. Then, what method should I use to rope in such a strong helper? Yun Zuyu's red lips took a sip of wine, a gentle smile on her face. "Little brother, you can benefit from both sides of the four of them. I'll make sure you take advantage of them. Alright, alright. I'll invite our boss over. Let's drink together. Dong Tianling said, wait here. The three of them were reluctant. What are you talking about? Your boss is still our boss. How can you go alone? Not only are you not giving boss face, you're also not giving us face. Yes, we're all brothers. Your boss is my boss. What do you mean, Dong Tianling? Are you trying to raise your own status? That's right. Dong Tianling is obviously trying to drive a wedge between our relationship with our boss. If he goes alone, he might say something bad about us in front of our boss. That must be it. You guys. Dong Tianling glared at the three shameless people. I've never seen such shameless people. What do you mean by your boss? Have you guys seen him before? We haven't even spoken a word and you're already calling him so affectionately. I'd like to ask you, have you guys ever been so respectful to the bosses of your respective families? I must get to know such a boss. As long as I see him, Chun Wanfeng will bow before him. From today onwards, I, Chiu Yun-san, will follow boss lead. My boss is wise and mighty, a genius gifted by the heavens, he's omnipotent. I, Xia Bingchuan, am willing to follow him forever. Hey! 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 Dong Tianling shouted with his eyes wide open, I say, don't be so familiar with each other. That's my boss. Only my boss. You guys haven't even seen him before, what kind of relationship are you talking about? Who was the one who said it yesterday? Ask me, Dong Tianling, why hasn't the idiot who was with you the other day come these days? Has he become a boss today? Xia Bingchuan was embarrassed. That was Chun Wanfeng, he said it, I didn't say it. You were the one who said it, why drag me into it? Chun Wanfeng retorted quickly. Xia Bingchuan was furious. Chun Wanfeng, you were the one who said that the handsome boy with Dong Tianling is a gigolo who lives off a woman, didn't you? Bullsh *T. Chiu Yun-san even said that the boy with Dong Tianling looks like he has a weak kidney, he might not be able to get hard. What does your fight have to do with me? Chiu Yun-san was enraged. Don't drive a wedge between me and boss. The three of them were flushed with anger as they exposed each other. Dong Tianling sneered as he watched the three of them fight amongst themselves. Who's scolding me? Following the angry voice, a silhouette appeared at the door, looking displeased. I, Yun, have only had a meal with Dong Tianling, how can my reputation be so bad? The four of them turned around in shock, only to see a person at the door. He was tall and handsome, his hair fluttering in the wind, looking as if he would leave with the wind at any time. He was dressed in a purple robe, elegant and graceful. Chapter 108. Boss. Dong Tianling sprung up. The three of them are scolding you. All three of them aren't good people. You have to be careful when you interact with them, boss. Don't be fooled by these despicable people, they. Dong Tianling. You bastard. Boss, boss. I wasn't talking about you just now. I'm Chun Wanfeng, do you know me, boss? It's okay if you don't, we'll get to know each other after today. You'll be my boss for life from now on. Chun Wanfeng's face was full of flattery as he leaned forward like a lapdog, his flattery endless like a torrential river. Boss. My dear boss. Xia Bingchuan was overwhelmed with emotion, tears welling up in his eyes as if he was about to cry. I've finally found you. From today onwards, I, Xia Bingchuan, will be at your beck and call, even if I have to die 1,000 times. Boss, boss. Chiu Yun-san's leg was still limping as he rushed forward. Boss. I've finally seen you. Sob, boss, it's a pity that my leg was almost broken just to see you. It's still not healed yet. From now on, Boss, I'll never go west if you ask me to. I'll never scold a chicken if you ask me to beat a dog. The scene of the three of them rushing forward together was a stunning one. At least, Yunyang felt that he was shocked. What was going on? What was going on? He had clearly heard these people talking about the person who was with Dong Tianling the other day. Why did the scene change in the blink of an eye? However, Yunyang's attention was then drawn to another matter. You're Qiu Yunsan. Yunyang scanned Qiu Yunsan from head to toe, his gaze unfriendly. If it were not for this child's trouble, would he be so passive now? I'm Qiu Yunsan. Qiu Yunsan was baffled. Why does boss look like he doesn't welcome me? Boss, you can call me Little Qiu or Little Sanshan, anything works. Your tone scares me, I've just been beaten up. Qiu Yunsan rolled up his trouser leg, acting pitiful as he pointed. Boss, look, my leg is still swollen, serves you right. Yunyang snorted, who asked you to be so blind? This is only the first time. What if you say you want to take Yun Zuyu as a concubine again tonight? Qiu Yunsan wailed, Boss, I don't dare to do it anymore. It's all Manager Mi's fault, it's none of my business. How is it none of your business? If you weren't stupid, there wouldn't be such a mess. Yunyang had already sat down. You jumped right into the pit that someone dug. It's fortunate that it's your uncle. Otherwise, you, Qiu Yunsan, would be dead this time. Qiu Yunsan's expression turned ferocious. That's right. My uncle told me about this as well. Motherf *****. This me guy is too much. This matter is definitely not over. So. Yunyang saw that he was almost done with his provocation, so he decided to add one last flame. Let's not talk about whether or not I'm worthy to be your boss. However, I don't want to have a little brother like you who was almost played to death. Yunyang smiled. Who knows when I'll be dragged down by you? It's better not to have a follower like this. Yunyang's gaze swept across Dong Tianling. Dong Tianling was filled with righteous indignation. That's right. Look at the mess you've caused. Not only have you been used, you've actually dragged the three of us into this as well. We've been sent to the Board of Justice's prison to spend the night. What an undeserved calamity. If it weren't for you, would our brothers have fought so hard? We've been dragged down by you enough. Don't drag our boss down anymore. Chun Wanfeng and Xia Bingchuan were not good at other things, but when it came to adding insult to injury, they were absolutely top-notch. You're right. I've never heard Dong Tianling say something so reasonable. That's right. Old Xiao, really, you've been like a jinx recently. Look at how you've caused Sister Yu. Look at how you've caused us. Look at how you've caused my face to grow pockmarks. Maybe we lost to Dong Tianling some time ago because of him. When have we ever lost before? As they spoke, the three of them suddenly stopped. Chun Wanfeng and Xia Bingchuan smacked their lips at the same time. This F***king makes a F***king lot of sense. Qiu Yunsan was extremely miserable when he heard them and said angrily, just you wait and see. If I don't mess with that fellow within 3 months, Dong Tianling said lightly, oh, a self-imposed time limit of 3 months? What a short time, it'll pass in the blink of an eye. Alright, I'll make an oath as well. If I'm not invincible in the world within 3,000 years, I'll die. I swear to the heavens. Ha ha ha. Xia Bingchuan and Chun Wanfeng guffawed. If I don't die within 3,000 years, I'll hang myself. If I can't pee on the sun once in 30,000 years, I'll kill myself. Ha ha ha. Qiu Yunsan was trembling all over, his face green with anger. Just you wait and see. 3 days. If I don't make this bastard pay within these 3 days, my surname isn't Qiu. Yunyang quickly tried to smooth things over. Everyone was just joking, why are you so serious? Come, come, let's drink. Seeing that their boss had stepped in to smooth things over, the group beamed with joy and began toasting him continuously. Yunyang emptied his goblet, instantly becoming intimate with each other, calling each other brothers. Only Chiu Yunsan was still livid, unable to find a way out of the situation. He was being ridiculed too harshly. Even when he occasionally forced a smile and drank a goblet of wine with Yunyang, he would start sulking again when he turned around. After a long while, in the heat of the wine, Chiu Yunsan threw the goblet onto the ground abruptly, shattering it into pieces. With bloodshot eyes, he said, "How dare he scheme against me? I must kill that bastard." This sudden sentence caused everyone to jump in fright. They then watched as Chiu Yunsan stood up abruptly and charged out in a rage. Yunyang frowned and shot a look at Dong Tianlong. "Go talk to him quickly." Dong Tianlong chased after him unwillingly. The group stopped drinking as well, but Dong Tianlong's persuasive voice could be heard coming from afar. "I say, why are you so boring? Everyone's drinking and we're having a good time, what are you doing? Are you angry that you've been schemed against? It's not the first time you've been schemed against. You have to get used to it. Look at your unlucky face, maybe you'll be schemed against by that me again." Yunyang was dumbfounded and asked, "Is this persuasion?" Chun Wanfeng and Xia Bingchuan laughed hysterically, holding their stomachs, as if everything was as they had expected. As expected, Dong Tianlong walked in with his chest puffed out and said helplessly, "Boss, I've tried so hard to persuade him just now, every word of mine is a gem, I've given my all to him, but he won't listen. I'm really at my wit's end. Trying so hard, giving his all to him. King know how to use idioms." Yunyang was exasperated as he reminded them, "Don't let him cause any trouble. Tiantang City isn't peaceful now. The military forces of various countries are about to arrive, it's a turbulent time. It can't be compared to normal times. If something happens to Chiu Yunsan here, you know the consequences. I'll be fine, but the three of you won't be able to get away with it. Do you understand? It's always better to be cautious." Dong Tianlong and the other two were moved to tears. "We'll remember boss' reminder. Don't worry, Chiu Yunsan has a temper. He'll go down on his own after a while. It won't be a big deal. Don't provoke him when you meet him again." Yunyang reminded them, "Let's not overdo things when we're friends. I've realized that all of you have quite a sharp tongue." The three of them guffawed. "That's because boss hasn't seen Chiu Yunsan's true face. If this happened to us, this bastard's tongue would be even sharper. We've already given him a lot of face because boss is here today. That's right, that's right. If we really do something, we can make him hang himself today." Yun Zuiyu sat on the side, watching Yunyang casually stir up the matter and remove himself from it. From the beginning to the end, there was not a single trace that could be found. She could not help but admire him. This young brother's methods were truly unpredictable. The other party had incited Chiu Yunsan to cause trouble, and he had incited Chiu Yunsan to retaliate. His methods were equally clean. No matter who he was facing, he could set his position straight at once. What he should say, what tone of voice, what attitude, he had grasped it perfectly. What a talent! Yun Zuiyu thought to herself. This was definitely an extraordinary character who could quickly stand firm and stir up trouble or even control the situation at any time, any place, and any environment. Was there such a powerful character among the 9 supreme subordinates? If there was, why had Flame never told me about it? I've been studying something during this period of time, Yunyang said. What is it? Dong Tianlong and the other two asked at the same time. Dong Tianlong had long been loyal to Yunyang, but Chun Wanfeng and Xia Bingchuan felt that Yunyang was a good person after this encounter, someone worth befriending. Frank, passionate, easy to make friends, forthright, loyal, and considerate of others. His demeanor was impeccable, and his elegance was even more graceful. He even had a bit of the rascality that rich young masters liked the most. Yes, he was a person who could mess around with his own people, but was completely unreasonable towards outsiders, just like me. Therefore, in a very short period of time, these two rich playboys went from wanting to make friends with each other. This was an extremely significant change in their mental journey. This is. Yunyang continued, is it possible for mystical beasts to break through another layer of their predetermined foundation, or rather, their inherent shackles, to reach a higher level? Yunyang's words were abrupt, but the three popinjays' eyes widened at the same time. Chapter 109. What did you say? Dong Tianling and the other two stuttered. I don't know if the noble families have other secret methods, but personally, I think there's such a possibility. Yunyang said, do you still remember that double-headed lion of yours? How was it? It worked after my training, didn't it? Yes, it worked. Dong Tianling was rather guilty as he looked at Chun Wanfeng and Xia Bingchuan awkwardly. Chun and Xia snorted angrily at the same time before looking at Yunyang fervently. Actually, the method of training the double-headed lion was only limited to raising its spirituality and breaking through its original habits and habitual actions. Although its ability has increased, it hasn't touched upon the limit of the mystical beast's innate talent. I'm still in the process of figuring out how to break through the limit. Actually, even if I were to succeed, I might not be able to improve much. Yunyang knew very well that a moment of congeniality was not a long-term solution when he was with these young masters of noble families. These four people did not seem to have any ulterior motives, but Yunyang knew very well that as long as they were sent by the four noble families and could roam the martial world on their own, how could they be fools? These fellows might look gullible, but if he really thought so, he would be the biggest fool. If he was useful and they wanted to befriend him, they would have all sorts of tricks up their sleeves. However, if he was useless, then they would have all sorts of tricks up their sleeves as well. It was not impossible for them to betray him when it came to benefits. On the other hand, as long as he could provide them with a certain amount of benefits, it would not be difficult for him to keep his position as the boss and even subdue them completely. However, this benefit had to be something they could not refuse and something they could not do themselves. Dong Tianling asked impatiently, how much can it improve? Chun Wanfeng and Xia Bingchuan's eyes were burning as well, even their breaths were held. I dare not say for sure now. Probably. Yunyang said, I can only raise it from beginner level to pinnacle. It's still impossible to skip levels. For example, raising a beginner 7th level mystical beast to 7th level pinnacle. Yunyang nodded, deep in thought. Dong Tianling was trembling with excitement. What if it's a beginner 9th level mystical beast? Yunyang replied, it's the same principle. Elevating to the pinnacle of the 9th level, what about it? He lifted his head and looked at Dong Tianling in surprise. Don't tell me you don't even know how to deduce such an analogy. He's an idiot. Chun Wanfeng was so agitated that his teeth were chattering. He moved closer and asked, Boss, are you sure you can really raise a beginner 9th level mystical beast to the peak of 9th level? Yunyang was taken aback when he heard the question. He thought about it for a moment and said, your question is on point. There really isn't such an absolute certainty right now. However, I'm currently thinking of perfecting my research step by step. So far, I've succeeded a little bit. The trio's eyes shone even brighter. However, to cultivate mystical beasts and break through their own shackles, we must start from the cub and conduct targeted training in all aspects. Yunyang said seriously, otherwise, the hope is slim. Of course. Of course. The three of them nodded at the same time like chickens pecking at rice. Everyone's hearts were already filled with hope. What was the difference between a 9th-level beginner stage mystical beast and a 9th-level peak mystical beast? According to the most conservative theory, a 9th-level peak mystical beast could easily kill 10 9th-level beginner stage mystical beasts. Furthermore, the 9th-level peak mystical beast might not even be injured after this battle, it would only be slightly tired at most. This was the difference between the two, it was like heaven and earth, a world apart. Thinking back to the rise of the Xiaofan family among the 4 noble families of the East, South, West, and North, it was because their old ancestor possessed a 9th-level pinnacle mystical beast that allowed them to charge forward step by step. Although the Xiaofan family had always proclaimed that it was a 9th-level peak mystical beast, who among the 8 noble families did not know the truth? If they could have a 9th-level peak mystical beast, for a moment, the 3 of them were like ants on a hot pan. They had to let the family know about this as soon as possible so that they could get their hands on a 9th-level mystical beast's cub at all costs. If I had. Dong Tianlong was the most impatient. A 9th-level beginner stage mystical beast. Boss, can you? His smile was filled with ingratiation, it was unprecedentedly bright. Yunyang rolled his eyes and said, "Can you not jump to conclusions based on hearsay? It's true that my research has some achievements, but can you not treat me like a god? Do you think it's easy to cultivate mystical beasts? This includes a lot of conditions, including profound crystals, spirit jades, heavenly materials and earthly treasures, and a large amount of investment. Most importantly, I'm still in the groping stage. Do you think high-level profound beasts are so easy to get, that you can get them just because you want them? But then again, if you're able to gather all the conditions, we'll settle the accounts and discuss the conditions. It's not impossible to help you once." Yunyang sighed. "We're all brothers. Do you call me boss for no reason? However, there's something I have to make clear. If you let others know about this, I'll never have a day of peace ever again. We'll never let anyone know." The 3 of them swore together, each of them overjoyed. Boss had said, "Do you call me boss for no reason?" He had said, "All of you, and not you." This meant that all of them had a share. Ha ha ha, this is great. Who would be so foolish as to spread the news? Wouldn't it be great to make a fortune in silence? I say, all of you should be more united in the future. Yunyang took the opportunity to put on the airs of a boss and lectured, "The 4 noble families are of the same breath and branch. Qiu Yunsan has been set up but all of you are gloating over his misfortune. This isn't right. If so, will all of you be the same when I'm set up in the future? Boss, we're wrong. This is our fault. There won't be a next time." Dong Tianlong, Chun Wanfeng, and Xia Bingchuan sincerely reflected at the same time. "We'll be united and friendly. If anything happens to boss, we won't hesitate to climb a mountain of swords or dive into a sea of flames. Stop. Stop trying to get close to me." Yunyang rolled his eyes and waved his hand. "I know all of you are anxious. Quickly send the message to your families. Come back for a drink after you're done. Don't say that I, the boss, am heartless. Thank you, boss." Ha ha ha. The 3 of them sprung up. With a swoosh, they disappeared without a trace. Yunyang turned to look at Yun Zuyu. Yun Zuyu's heart skipped a beat. Could it be, "Young brother, do you have something to tell me?" Yun Zuyu asked anxiously. "It's nothing much. Sister-in-law, you don't have to be so careful." Yunyang smiled easily. Yun Zuyu felt like she had been struck by lightning. Sister-in-law. Yunyang had been reluctant to call her sister-in-law before this, but now he had called her so naturally. Why? Tears welled up in Yun Zuyu's eyes as she trembled in disbelief. "Young brother, what did you call me?" "Sister-in-law." Yunyang called her name clearly and enunciated each word clearly. "Fifth brother said, no matter if he's alive or dead, you're always his wife. Yun Zuyu took 2 rapid breaths. Her jade-like face suddenly flushed red as tears streamed down her cheeks in a stream. She covered her mouth and wiped her tears away with her other hand, but she could not wipe them clean no matter how hard she tried. This heartless man. Yun Zuyu's voice was sobbing. He's finally enlightened, Yun Yang smiled. Still, I can only call you Sister Yu in front of others. I hope sister-in-law will be magnanimous enough to forgive me. Yun Yang smiled. Still, I can only call you Sister Yu in front of others. I hope sister-in-law is magnanimous enough to forgive me. Yun Zuyu's face glowed as she said, this is how it should be. Besides, you're causing me trouble by calling me sister-in-law in front of others. It was obvious that she was trying to enlighten Yun Yang. Yun Zuyu wished that everyone in the world would know that she was her sister-in-law. I, Yun Zuyu, am also someone with a husband. Where is he now? Yun Zuyu was laughing and crying at the same time as she asked softly while wiping her tears. He can't come back for now. Yun Yang said carefully, maybe, a very long time, I'll wait no matter how long it takes. Yun Zuyu raised her hand to stop Yun Yang from continuing. She said seriously, as long as I have this sentence, it's enough. Even if I, Yun Zuyu, have to wait for a lifetime, until I become a pile of dirt. I'll wait. Yun Yang looked at her in a daze and sighed softly in his heart. Yun Zuyu quickly collected herself and wiped away her tears. She actually raised a goblet of wine and said, brother, come, let us have a drink. Let us celebrate. That heartless fellow, has finally become a man today. Yun Yang did not know whether to laugh or cry. If his 5th brother Supreme Flame, who had always been hot-tempered, were to really hear this comment, what kind of reaction would he have? Yun Zuyu had already emptied her goblet. Her eyes were gleaming as she said flirtatiously, young brother, do you know? Today is the happiest, most comfortable, and most satisfying cup of wine I've ever had in so many years. From now on, this body has a burden. From now on, this love has a burden. From now on, this heart belongs to someone. Yun Zuyu chuckled, her eyes misty as she said, from now on, I have no regrets in this life. Yun Yang could only feel a wave of suppressed air rushing up his chest, almost blocking his throat. He coughed and said, I'm very happy too. He raised his goblet and emptied it in one gulp, only to feel that this goblet of wine was sour, sweet, bitter, and spicy. Dong Tianling and the other 2 came back very quickly and happily toasted each other, determined to drink until they were drunk. Yun Zuyu excused herself from staying up late and went back to rest. Her footsteps when she walked out were light and brisk. There was even the liveliness of a young girl. Yun Yang could even hear that Yun Zuyu could not help but let out a carefree chuckle when she walked out of the room. However, this carefree chuckle was like a sharp needle that pierced into Yun Yang's heart. What would happen in the future? Yun Yang was at a loss now. He felt that he was like a cobbler who was working in vain, trying desperately to mend the top of a net that had a hole in the bottom. It was like a lie that could not withstand any scrutiny. Yun Yang and the other 3 chatted as they drank. Other than Yun Yang, who seemed to be troubled and seemed to be fine on the surface, the other 3 looked rather nervous, as if they were waiting for something. Finally, there was a loud bang. A person rushed in. Chapter 110. What is it? Dong Tianling's expression tightened. Young Master Chiu, he. Young Master Chiu. The guard was out of breath. He has captured everyone in the Mi family's alley, he's parading them through the streets in the middle of the night, heading towards the inn. Dong Tianling and the other 2 men sucked in a breath of cold air as if they had a toothache. The faces of the 3 of them twitched. Chiu Yunsan's eldest young Master Chiu's actions were swift indeed. He had actually carried out his revenge in such a short period of time. He had directly captured all of Keeper Mi's family members. However, this incident was about to become an earth-shattering event. That shopkeeper Mi was no ordinary merchant. He was a true-blue minister of the imperial household. He was a high-ranking figure who could easily reach the ears of the emperor. You're just a young master of a martial world family, how could you openly capture the entire family? What kind of explanation is that? No matter how powerful the Qiu family was, transcending the laws of the world, it was still a little too much for you to do this in someone else's capital city. It was unjustifiable. Besides, this fellow had an uncle who was the head of the military generals, old Marshal Qiu. He would not be able to explain himself just because of his age. Yun Yang's hand that was holding his wine cup could not help but tremble. I'm still thinking about what you're going to do. I've come up with hundreds and thousands of ingenious plans, but I didn't expect you to use such a direct, unreasonable, simple, violent, and brainless method, big brother. Yun Yang was speechless for a moment. My original intention was only to borrow a knife. You don't have to be so dramatic. This kind of situation, to put it in a sentence that we can all understand, is, I just wanted to borrow a knife, but you threw me an atomic bomb. And it's already been ignited. We're in trouble. These 3 words came out of the 4 men's mouths at the same time. Let's go over quickly and see if there's any way to turn things around. Dong Tianlong sprung up like his but was on fire. F***ck, we're really dragged down by this jinx this time. My God, please don't kill anyone. If we really do, we're all doomed. The 4 of them left in a hurry. Yun Yang looked calm on the surface, but his heart was in turmoil. Other than cursing in his heart, he didn't have any other thoughts regarding the behavior of these young masters from aristocratic families. Just as the 4 of them arrived at the Tower into Heaven Inn, before Qiu Yunsan could be called out, the 3rd party had arrived. The one leading them was old Marshal Qiu. It was obvious that the old man was furious. One could not blame old Marshal Qiu for being angry. As far as the eye could see, the courtyard of the inn where Qiu Yunsan stayed was filled with more than 100 people. These people were the residents of the Mi family alley, all of Keeper Mi's family members. There were also many distant relatives who had been captured and brought here by young Master Qiu. Because they were arrested in the dark of the night, many of them were not even wearing clothes. They were only wrapped in a bedsheet, and their faces were filled with terror as they shivered and were at a loss of what to do. Since you dared to trick me, you'll have to pay the price. Qiu Yunsan's face was filled with murderous intent, the veins on his neck bulging. I don't care if you're the F***king Minister of Household Affairs or Minister of Household Affairs. How dare you plot against your father? If that thing with no bottom doesn't come and give your father an explanation before dawn, your father will bury all these people alive. Little bastard. Old Marshal Qiu was enraged as he roared, release them immediately. Not releasing. Qiu Yunsan straightened his neck and was equally enraged. Old Marshal Qiu, you're the marshal of the Empire of Yutong, but today's matter is a personal grudge. There's no room for you to intervene. This child was not even calling him uncle anymore. Old Marshal Qiu was infuriated. His eyes darted left and right, looking for a stick. Uncle, are you going to lecture me again? You and I are both descendants of the Qiu family. It's understandable if you lecture your nephew because of this identity. Qiu Yunsan looked into the old marshal's eyes that were spitting fire. But uncle, your identity now is the marshal of the Empire of Yutong. One is for the country, the other is for the family. Have you forgotten, uncle? Other than plotting against me, the one with the surname Mi has also plotted against you. No matter how I put it, uncle, what you do is the Empire of Yutong's business. But how I seek justice is the Qiu family's business. These are 2 matters that cannot be confused. If I admit to this matter just like this, how can the Chiu family walk the martial world with dignity in the future? Are we going to admit it when we know that we've been set up and set up? In that case, what if we are set up by others again in the future? What will we do then? Will we be dealt with the same way? Old Marshal Chiu could not help being stunned when he heard the words, his rage extinguished. The cause of this matter is indeed me being a popinjay. I'm not sensible, I have a childish temper, I'm mischievous. It's my own weakness that caused others to set up this trap. Chiu Yunsan said boldly, I admit to all of the above. I'll ask for forgiveness when I return to the family. However, this is not a reason for the one with the surname Mi to set me up. Here, my surname is Chiu. Here, no matter how disappointing I am, I'm still a part of the Chiu family and I represent the Chiu family. Setting a trap for me is the same as setting a trap for the Chiu family. The Chiu family will never swallow this humiliation for nothing. Old Marshal Chiu heaved a deep sigh, the rage within him had vanished without a trace. His gaze towards Chiu Yunsan was even a little comforted. This little bastard has finally grown some brains, knowing to pull me out of the picture. Looking at Chiu Yunsan who was being reasonable, Old Marshal Chiu had a thought in his heart, he's grown up. Yun Yang, Chun Wanfeng, Xia Bingchuan, and Dong Tianlin were watching and listening from the side, exchanging looks of surprise. Since when did Chiu Yunsan become so reasonable? This was not like him, the matter has to be resolved. Old Marshal Chiu sighed. But no lives can be lost. Otherwise. He did not continue, only giving his nephew a discreet look. Chiu Yunsan said word by word, whether lives are lost or not depends on how the one with the surname Mi does. If the one with the surname Mi doesn't give me an explanation, I'll slaughter his entire family. There's no room for discussion on this matter. The old marshal sighed and waved his hand. Move to the side, line up, move back. Then, he strode to the side. Yun Yang instinctively wanted to hide himself but Chiu Jianhan was already walking straight towards him. Child of the Yun family. Chiu Jianhan's gaze was deep, like an eagle that had caught a sparrow, pinned to Yun Yang's face. Yun Yang chuckled and came out to greet him. Old Sir Chiu is well. Chiu Jianhan's probing gaze landed on Yun Yang's face, a faint smile on his lips. You run pretty fast, child. Why do I realize that you're involved in everything? Yun Yang was bewildered. What? Chiu Jianhan snorted angrily. This old man is saying that you're running fast to watch the show, even faster than this old man, Yun Yang chuckled apologetically. How would I dare? Who would dare to watch such a show? It's just that I happened to be present at the right time and couldn't leave. I was drinking with young Master Dong and the others when they came all the way here for the sake of brotherhood. I'm too embarrassed to go home alone. Chiu Jianhan's face remained impassive. They're loyal to brotherhood, what about you? Yun Yang patted his chest. Old sir, please understand. This nephew is only a popinjay but I've always kept the word brotherhood in mind. Where there's righteousness, there's no turning back. For brothers and friends, brotherhood is the most important. This, Chiu Jianhan frowned, looking at this glib-tongued fellow, feeling like he was a loach that he could not catch. Are you free tomorrow? Old Marshal Chiu asked. Yun Yang felt that something was amiss but he could not shirk the responsibility now. He could only bite the bullet and say, perhaps. I'm fine, but... I'm not sure. Chiu Jianhan was exasperated. Whether you're free or not, wait at home tomorrow. This old man will go to your house to take a look. It's decided then. Yun Yang pulled a long face and said, Old Marshal, please reconsider. This nephew is poor, I can't even afford a maid. It's inevitable that I won't be a good host then. Why don't? This old man is a rough fellow, why would I need a maid to serve me? It's decided then. Chiu Jianhan made the final decision. Yun Yang's mouth hung open helplessly. He had never seen such an unreasonable person. Xiao Jianhan snorted. He had always been paying attention to Yun Yang, but Yun Yang, who was not supposed to be here, was actually here as well on such a special occasion. He could not help but connect the dots. Inexplicably, he felt that Yun Yang was filled with mystery. In spite of this mysterious person was behaving like a popinjay that could not be helped. It was extremely incongruous. As the old marshal hesitated, he suddenly realized that this child's popinjay behavior seemed to only appear in front of him. Your father seems to have been deceived. Xiao Jianhan had even abandoned this old man and started calling himself your father. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that this deceiving fellow was guilty of the most heinous crime. Suddenly, there was a commotion in front of them. Silhouettes darted about continuously. It was a group of imperial guards who had rushed over. Yun Yang pursed his lips and said, "Old Marshal, Sir Mi is here." Things are getting worse. Dong Tianling and the others grew nervous once more. Xiao Yunsan had been extremely impulsive in this matter. He had captured someone else's family indiscriminately. Even if it was understandable that he had been tricked, he had completely lost this advantage when he had captured someone else's family. As for you, a young master of the Qiu family who was not the direct heir, you had challenged a nation's imperial director in someone else's base camp in Tiantang City. Chapter 111. If Mi Kongquan had entered the Qiu family's territory and entered the martial world, it would not have been difficult for the Qiu family to toy with him to death as long as he had left Tiantang City. However, they were in Tiantang City after all. It would not be difficult for Mi Kongquan to toy with Xiao Yunsan to death as the local tyrant. Groups of imperial guards arrived one after another. Without saying a word, they first occupied the high ground and then began to set up defenses in all directions. They did not interfere with Xiao Yunsan and the others, nor did they save anyone, they only watched the scene unfold. In spite of this, the number of people increased, forming an absolute suppression of power. Old Marshal Qiu's expression grew uglier as he muttered a curse, "Damned eunuch, how arrogant." Yun Yang said to Dong Tianling, intentionally or otherwise, "Little Leng, how many people have come from your family this time? I'm afraid the situation isn't looking good. The Qiu family is most likely going to suffer a loss." Dong Tianling was already sweating as he said with a dark expression, "Our family has the least people. Other than me, there are only 2 guards." Now, Dong Tianling's worry was evident in his words. What should we do? How did things become so serious? Old Marshal Xiao Jianhan's expression had darkened completely. Scuffling footsteps could be heard, as if the soles of their shoes were scraping against the ground with each step as they walked over slowly. The sound was messy, making one's heart flutter. Then, 5 silhouettes walked out slowly from the other end of the street. Every one of them was slightly hunched over. Each of them was fair and beardless. Each of them wore a eunuch's uniform. Each of them wore a deadpan expression, their gazes unmoving like zombies. Each of them had a horsetail whisk in their arms. Each of them was walking with their feet splayed out. This group of people had turned the corner of the street in the middle of the night, but it gave everyone a sense of eeriness. The one in the middle was taller than the rest. He was middle-aged, beardless, pale, and muscular. His gaze was colder as well, he seemed to be the leader of the group. However, Yun Yang's gaze fell on the face of the person on his right. Eunuch Wu. Eunuch Wu, whom he had almost killed with a single slap and had half of his teeth knocked out, was also the familiar silhouette who had attempted to assassinate him in front of the residence of Yun. This person had been hiding in the depths of the palace ever since that day. Yun Yang had never had the chance to see him again. This was the first time he had seen this person appear in front of him after the assassination attempt. Using Dong Tianling's body as a cover, Yun Yang observed the eunuch carefully. As far as the eye could see, his footsteps were still weak, his eyes were dull, and his body was not tall and straight. From head to toe, there was still no sign of cultivation. If anyone saw him, they would instantly come to the conclusion that he was a eunuch who had lost his body, a eunuch who did not have many years left to live. In spite of this, Yunyang noticed something that others would not have noticed. He had knocked out many of his teeth the other day, so this fellow's cheeks should have been deflated. However, they looked full now. It was as if he had never been injured. This was thought-provoking. As if sensing Yunyang's gaze, Eunuch Wu lifted his head to look in his direction. Seeing Yunyang who was glaring at him, a deep hatred flashed in his eyes. Young Master Chiu. The eunuch in the middle was Keeper Mi Kongquan himself. Mi Kongquan squinted his eyes, his gaze focused on Chiu Yunsan who was in the crowd and said faintly, "We're all friends after all. Isn't it a little too much for you to do this?" Chiu Yunsan was enraged. F***CKU. Is it a little too much for you to set me up? Mi Kongquan, don't you try this with me. Let me ask you, how do you plan to give me an explanation? Mi Kongquan narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "I only want to know, what kind of explanation do you want, young Master Chiu?" Chiu Yunsan snorted coldly and said, "Mi Kongquan, you've set me up and tarnished the Chiu family's reputation. You've even made me fall into your trap and almost lost my reputation. I'm indebted to you for your hospitality. Do I have any other way other than to take your life?" Mi Kongquan chuckled coldly. "I'm afraid the explanation that young Master Chiu wants isn't easy to ask for." He chuckled coldly. "Young Master Chiu is in Yutong's capital city, right under the emperor's feet, yet you've brazenly kidnapped innocent citizens. You're so brazen, completely disregarding the nation's laws. I wonder how young Master Chiu plans to give the empire of Yutong." Chiu Yunsan was stunned and said angrily, "Mi Kongquan, are you going to talk about an explanation with me?" Mi Kongquan sneered. "Talk about what? I, Mi Kongquan, am also a citizen of Yutong. How can I allow a lowly person like you to do as you please? Today, I'll take you down first and go to the Chiu family to ask for forgiveness from the Chiu family's old patriarch. It's only right that I give an explanation to the old patriarch then." Chiu Yunsan chortled. "Mi Kongquan, don't you dare." Mi Kongquan's gaze was vicious. "Young Master Chiu will know whether I dare or not very soon." Seeing that both parties were getting more and that Chiu Yunsan's eyes were spitting fire and he was about to attack, Yunyang sighed instinctively. Chiu Yunsan was still too young. Even if he had a plan, he was still too impulsive. Mi Kongquan had been talking about the country of Yutong, every word he said was righteous. If Chiu Yunsan were to be stubborn and even make the first move, the Chiu family would not be able to say anything even if he were to be killed here today. A sliver of disappointment flashed across old Marshal Chiu Jianhan's eyes. Chiu Yunsan's original intention was to put the matter on the martial world's grudge and he had used this argument to force old Marshal Chiu to retreat. However, he did not, or rather, he did not manage to do so in time. Mi Kongquan had seized the initiative and caused the subsequent development to change completely. He was still too young, Mi Kongquan. Old Marshal Chiu said faintly. "Old Marshal." Mi Kongquan bowed respectfully. Although he was the emperor's valet, he knew that if he were to really fight with Chiu Jianhan, he would be the unlucky one. "You talk about the righteousness of the nation. This old man would like to ask you, what was the righteousness of the nation when you plotted against Chiu Yunsan?" Chiu Jianhan asked, "What was the righteousness of the nation when you plotted against Chiu Yunsan?" Mi Kongquan lifted his head abruptly. "Old Marshal, it was obvious that Chiu Jianhan did not want to give him time to explain. He cut him off and said, 'You plotted to drag this old man's wife into this as well. What was the righteousness of the nation?'" Mi Kongquan was stunned. Then, he looked aggrieved as he said, "Old Marshal, I know you're Qiu Yunsan's uncle and Qiu Yunsan is your nephew, but you," Qiu Jianhan frowned and said, "this is the Empire of Yutang, Tiantang City. What do you mean by uncle and nephew? Is this your reason? Or are you saying that this old man is playing favoritism and cheating now? Not only did you not answer this old man's question about the righteousness of the nation, you've even brought the topic to our family. What a beautiful trick you've played. Mi Kongquan, is this the answer you're giving this old man?" Mi Kongquan said angrily, "Old Marshal doesn't care about the thugs who openly threaten and kidnap people. Instead, you're pressuring me, a victim. What is the meaning of this? This old man doesn't mean anything." The old marshal pointed at the imperial guards around him and said faintly, "You're the majordomo of the imperial household, but how can you mobilize so many imperial guards? Where's the warrant to mobilize the troops? Show it to this old man. This old man is very interested to know who has given you such a great authority." The tip of Mi Kongquan's nose was already sweating as he said in a shrill voice, "This majordomo has the authority to mobilize the imperial guards to encircle and annihilate the traitors who plot against the palace." Qiu Jianhan pressed on. "What a great accusation. May I ask where the palace is? And where is this place? Majordomo Mi, your so-called authority can't be used arbitrarily even in the palace. How can it be done unless it's an emergency? Now that you've brought the imperial guards out of the palace and come here with such fanfare, who has given you the authority to do so? This is the nation's military force. The force that guards the palace. It's not a private army that a mere eunuch like you, Mi Kongquan, a eunuch, can command." Qiu Jianhan's tone was stern. If he did not step forward, his nephew would definitely be at a disadvantage. It would be a grievance that he had to keep to himself. It would not be for nothing, but it could very well cost his life. While he could turn the situation around by stepping forward like this, he would definitely offend this person who was close to His Majesty the Emperor. There would be no end to the trouble. Facing old Marshal Qiu's forceful approach, Mi Kongquan's gaze was filled with resentment. Qiu Jianhan did not speak to Mi Kongquan anymore but turned to look at the imperial guards on the wall. "Which one of you is the leader? Come here." A burly guard leaped down. "Old Marshal. Show me the tiger tally that mobilizes you." The old marshal extended his arm and said in an unquestionable tone, "Let me see who allowed all of you to leave the palace, who signed the order to allow all of you to follow Mi Kongquan out." The leader of the guards was flushed. No. Their trip this time was purely on their own. How could there be any tiger tally? No. The old marshal's expression turned dangerous. "You all came out just like that without any? Your mission is to protect the palace. Protect His Majesty. How can you leave your post without permission? If something happens in the palace, how many heads do you have to bear the responsibility? Even if you don't want your own life, do you want the lives of your family?" The leader of the guards was flushed. This humble official, all of you, scram back." Qiu Jianhan glared at them. "Do you really want this old man to chase all of you away? Go back and be vigilant. If there's a next time, this old man shall report this to His Majesty and punish you severely. I shall exterminate your entire family. Save all of you from risking your lives like this. Yes." Chapter 112. Swoosh, in just a short moment, all the imperial guards had left. Only 5 eunuchs were left in the hall. At this point, the difference in strength between the two sides had been reversed. Mi Kongquan was trembling with rage. His slender eyes glared at Qiu Jianhan like a venomous snake, filled with viciousness. Qiu Jianhan waved his sleeves and said faintly, "This old man can't be bothered to get involved in martial world grudges and personal matters like yours. I'm warning all of you, don't stir up trouble in the imperial city or else this old man will not let you off easily. Let's go. Mi Kongquan, I'll settle our scores with you after you've settled these trivial matters. I won't take advantage of you today as well. You're on your own now. The old marshal turned around angrily and strode away without giving anyone a chance to speak. Yunyang and the others were in awe as they watched from the side. Old Marshal Qiu was an expert. The older the ginger, the spicier it was indeed. His roguish methods were truly impressive. Yunyang could not help but be impressed. Old Marshal Qiu Jianhan's roguish domineering method was a stroke of genius. Seeing that his nephew could not hold on any longer, he had intervened immediately before the situation worsened. Once he had struck, he had aimed for Mi Kongquan's vital points without holding back. With a few simple words, he spoke of the nation's righteousness, giving Mi Kongquan a taste of his own medicine. He had suppressed Mi Kongquan's arrogance to the point that he could not even retaliate. As long as Mi Kongquan dared to argue, Qiu Jianhan would capture him directly and execute him on the spot would only be a matter of convenience. Even though Mi Kongquan was aware of the severity of the situation and dared not argue, old Marshal Qiu had chased the other party's men away with his official authority and righteousness, leaving the other party without an army. Pulling old Marshal Qiu, who was already at his limits, he had even said before he left, "The martial world is the martial world, this old man can't be bothered with it. This old man does not take advantage of others." He had left just like that. No, old Qiu seemed to have left a threat before he left. "I'll settle the score with you after you're done here. If you don't handle it well, this old man will really settle the score with you." Settle the score. Let's see how you deal with my nephew. My nephew is dealing with you. If you get hurt, or die, it's your bad luck. But if my nephew does anything wrong, then we'll continue to settle the score. The thickness of their skin could not be described as being as thick as a city wall. At the very least, they had to be as thick as a city wall. This is what a troublemaker is. This is what an old hooligan is. This is the pinnacle of being unreasonable. This is the highest realm. To look up to a high mountain and be intimidated. I'm utterly impressed. Yunyang reflected on himself deeply. In terms of being shameless, being a pain in the neck, acting like a hooligan, and being unreasonable, there was a lot of room for improvement. There was a lot more that he needed to learn. Look at the old marshal. When his nephew was at a complete disadvantage, he only needed one move to turn the situation around. This kind of method was many times more brilliant than the twists and turns he had just thought of. Simple, brutal, and direct. In spite of this, the effect was immediate and penetrating. It was truly remarkable. Looking at the 5 eunuchs who were dumbfounded on the spot, the crowd almost burst out laughing. How could a few eunuchs who had been living in the palace all year round want to compete with a veteran hooligan like Qiu Jianhan, an old hooligan, an old troublemaker? It was not even on the same technical level. Everything else aside, both parties were separated by an important organ. Mi Kongquan narrowed his eyes, looking at the direction where Qiu Jianhan had left and snorted coldly. The old marshal's parting words are very reasonable. It's just a trivial personal matter, there's no need to stir up such a commotion. It's getting late now, let's settle the score quickly. It's not a big deal after all, let's end it quickly. Yunyang strode out gracefully and began to smooth things over. Actually, I feel that this is a misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding here and there. Keeper Mi isn't an outsider and young Master Qiu is a friend as well. Let's talk amicably and end this misunderstanding. How about that? Mi Kongquan's cold gaze swept over Yunyang, obviously not knowing who this fellow who had popped out of nowhere was. Who did he think he was to forcefully pretend to be a peacemaker at such a critical juncture? Did he have the authority to do so? It's alright if you all really don't want to talk. Yunyang changed his tone immediately when he saw that no one was responding. Every grievance has its perpetrator, every debt has its debtor. The martial world's matters shall be settled in the martial world. Let's settle this grudge using the martial world's methods here. Isn't that satisfying? Let's fight. Whoever has the bigger fist is the one with the bigger reason. Yunyang said, anyway, there are 4 noble families on one side and 5 eunuchs on the other. According to the numbers, 5 is still more than 4. Why don't I share one as well? This must be Eunuch Wu over there. We're old acquaintances, let's have a chat. I'll leave the rest to you all. What a shameless statement. Yunyang had already sprung up and charged towards Eunuch Wu when everyone else was still in a daze after he finished speaking. This time, I, Lord Jiu, will have a good look at what kind of material this guy's foundation is made of. On the other side, Chiu Yunsan readily agreed. What Boss Yun said is exactly what I want. Release Keeper Mi's men, will only entertain Keeper Mi alone today. All of you, attack. Before his words echoed in the air, the 8 guards of the 4 noble families and the rest of the guards swarmed forward. They were all experienced in the martial world. When the Imperial Guards had gathered earlier, there was a huge disparity in their strengths. Naturally, they dared not make any reckless moves. However, the tables had turned now and old Marshal Chiu's implied killing intent before he left was obvious. Of course, it would be best if they could keep Keeper Mi here forever, especially when they had the upper hand in this battle where they had the advantage of numbers. It would be a great favor to them. How could Dong Tianling and the rest be left behind? We're here too. F***ck, you weren't the only one who was tricked this time. We've been implicated after this as well. We have to find Mi Kongquan for this as well. Yes, I have to ask him for compensation for my pockmarks. Me too. Shui Yuan is most likely his accomplice. You're right. They must be together. Watch out for my fist. On the other side, Eunuch Wu's expression changed when he saw Yun Yang's overbearing approach. Without another word, he ran away. Yun Yang chased after the eunuch, throwing a large brick in his hand like a shooting star. It landed squarely on the back of Eunuch Wu's head with a loud thud, eliciting a low grunt from the other party. This was only the beginning. Yun Yang had somehow managed to grab 7 to 8 bricks in his hands and was hurling them at Eunuch Wu. Eunuch Wu struggled with all his might, and when he finally made it to the corner, he was already hit by 5 to 6 bricks. He was bleeding profusely and his face was swollen. Yun Yang was inexplicably pleased, thinking that this fellow dared not expose his ability in front of others indeed. However, he liked this the most. You're afraid to expose yourself, I'll kill you directly. Let's see if you choose to expose yourself or be beaten to death by me. Roaring loudly, Yun Yang chased after Eunuch Wu like he was flying. Turning the corner, he could not help being stunned. The entire path was empty, but Eunuch Wu was nowhere to be seen. He ran away. Yun Yang turned back immediately, not giving this fellow the chance to assassinate him. He could not defeat him now, it was already good enough that he could take advantage of the situation. This fellow will reveal his true cultivation base once he's out of sight, not giving me a chance to attack. Yun Yang thought as he walked, but shouldn't this fellow be on the same side as Mi Kongquan? Why doesn't he dare show his ability in front of him? He'd rather be beaten half to death and humiliated to the point where he's worse than a pig or a dog. Why is he unwilling to show his ability? This was a mystery that he could not solve. However, Yun Yang believed that he would be able to solve it very soon. This fellow had suffered 2 consecutive losses in his hands. It would be strange if he did not want to seek revenge. Based on the fact that he had come back for revenge the last time, it was not difficult to determine this person's vengeful nature. He believed that he would definitely come for another assassination later. As long as he came for him again, Yunyang would be able to find out the truth. When Yunyang turned back to take a look at the battle, he was shocked. There were 4 eunuchs left, including Mi Kongquan. 3 of them had been defeated, leaving only Mi Kongquan to put up a fight. Mi Kongquan's ability was extraordinary. Even when he was facing the 4 noble young masters, 8 guards, and 30 to 40 other experts' attacks, he was still able to handle the situation with ease. His body was like a swimming dragon as he weaved through the crowd. Occasionally, he would strike and there would definitely be someone retreating, spitting blood. This General Steward Mi was a top master who was rarely seen in this world. With his own strength, he was able to withstand the combined attack of 40 to 50 experts. Although the majority of the attackers were at the 4th or 5th peak, the 8 guards were all at the 6th peak and above. There were even 2 experts who had reached the 7th peak. With such a strong combined ability, he could not even take care of Mi Kongquan. From Yunyang's observation, Mi Kongquan had not even given his all and was still holding back. He did not know if it was old Marshal Qiu's warning ringing in his ears or if he himself knew that a head-on fight would not prove anything. It could even give both parties a buffer to step down. If he were to accidentally kill these 4 popinjays, then, even if he were to hide in the palace forever, he would never be able to escape from the 4 noble families' deadly pursuit. Yunyang's gaze was sharp, he could see through this in just a blink of an eye. At the same time, he came to the final conclusion that they were powerless to kill Mi Kongquan tonight. Chapter 113. No matter how popinjays the 4 noble young masters were, they were still aware of the fact that they were powerless against the strong. Obviously, they had realized this as well. Just as they were worried that they would not be able to back down, they retreated in unison upon hearing Yunyang's voice, as if they had received a divine command. Mi Kongquan's chilling gaze fell upon Yunyang once more, his anger rising again. It's that brat again. Just now, when they had the advantage in numbers, this brat suggested to solve the problem by ganging up on them. Now, seeing that so many people could not defeat him, he actually jumped out to be the peacemaker. For a moment, Keeper Mi could not help feeling that although this child was young, his shamelessness was no less than Qiu Jinhan's. What AF** King genius. In spite of it, Mi Kongquan wanted to put an end to this matter as well. Things might really get out of hand if they were to continue. Seeing that the other party had stopped, he jumped out of the circle as well. We're all people of status after all. Yunyang walked to the center of the circle and said earnestly, how can we fight and kill so savagely? Mi Kongquan and the 4 young masters rolled their eyes at the same time. You just said that we're all martial artists, and that we can settle our problems with a fight. The martial world is the martial world, and so on. The words are still ringing in our ears, but we've all become people of status just because the situation isn't right. This guy could say anything with just a flip of his tongue. What's the problem? What's the misunderstanding? Can't we just talk it out face to face? There's no need to resort to violence. Yunyang continued to mediate, young Master Qiu, it's better to squash enmity than to keep it alive. We've fought for so long, and our anger should have dissipated. Why don't we have a peaceful talk? Qiu Yunsan thought to himself, my anger hasn't dissipated, it's just that I can't beat him. Mi Kongquan thought to himself, my anger hasn't subsided but there's no benefit in continuing this fight, Keeper Mi. Yunyang looked at Mi Kongquan and said, I've heard about the whole story as well. You've probably done something bad out of good intentions, causing young Master Qiu to be in trouble right away, and it's a little more serious, am I right? He turned to Qiu Yunsan. What about you, young Master Qiu? You're young and arrogant, aren't you? Since we've lost face, we have to get it back. That's understandable, don't you think? Both sides nodded simultaneously. How about this, I will propose a solution for both of you to consider. Yunyang said, what about you, young Master Qiu? First, send all the people you've invited back. I believe you don't have the intention to kidnap or threaten them. You're only joking with Keeper Me. Compensate each of them with 100 silver taels as compensation for their fright. That's not a lot, is it? As for these 3 eunuchs, each of them will have to pay 1,000 taels of silver for their medical fees. Yunyang replied, then young Master Chiu's problem will be solved. He turned to look at Mi Kongquan and said, however, Steward Mi's handling of the matter was indeed a little inappropriate. How about this? Since young Master Chiu has agreed to bury the hatchet, Steward Mi shall symbolically take out some imperial luminary paste to settle this matter. Imperial luminary paste? Mi Kongquan's tone had changed as he stared at Yunyang with wide eyes. Are you trying to be a peacemaker? You are obviously trying to extort money from us. On the other side, Chiu Yunsan's eyes shone as he said, boss is right. As long as Steward Mi takes out 5 portions of imperial luminary paste, we will write off today's matter. Pretend that it never happened. Dong Tianling and the other 2 men's eyes shone as well. Brother Chiu is right. We are friends with Keeper Mi. Why do we have to damage our friendship? As long as you give us 5 portions of imperial luminary paste, we will bury the hatchet and wipe it all away. Mi Kongquan laughed in exasperation. What a good plan you have. This is absolutely impossible. The imperial luminary paste was one of Yutong's imperial secret medicines, its effects were extremely potent. Back when Yutong was founded, His Majesty had obtained the carcass of a legendary mystical beast, the Yin-Yang snake, by chance. It was also because he had eaten the Yin-Yang snake's flesh that he had attained the unrivaled mystical skill. He had beheaded generals and seized flags, triumphed in every battle, building his influence step by step until he had founded the Empire of Yutong. The entire Empire of Yutong now was a country that had been built from nothing, built with bare fists. It was evident how potent the Yin-Yang snake was. In spite of this, the strongest part of the Yin-Yang snake was not its flesh but its inner core. This inner core was recognized by the entire Tianxian continent as the only remaining top-notch mystical beast, the Yin-Yang snake's inner core. Cultivators in this realm could not consume it to enhance their cultivation base, even a grandmaster's top-notch expert would only explode and die if he consumed it. A treasure that could not be used was of little value no matter how precious it was. Initially, this super inner core had been reduced to a symbolic treasure for quite some time. However, by chance, Yutong's imperial family had accidentally discovered that this inner core that could not be consumed to enhance one's cultivation base could be brewed into wine. Furthermore, the wine that was brewed was extraordinary. The process of brewing the wine was simple. The inner core was placed in a bowl filled with wine for a day and a night. The wine in the bowl would then condense into a semi-solid paste, there was only the bottom of the bowl. However, after consuming the bottom of the bowl, one would be invincible. The man's ability would be outstanding. This was secondary, what was more important was that, if there was a powerful expert by his side to assist him, a gifted person could cultivate immediately after consuming the luminary paste. With the help of the expert beside him to inject mystical qi into him, it was possible for him to awaken another chakra on top of his innate foundation. This was what made the luminary paste truly extraordinary. Although it was only a possibility of awakening another chakra, this was the only way to break through the innate chakra in the entire Tianxian continent. In this world, only Yutong's palace had this incredible item. Now, Yunyang wanted 5 portions at once. This was more than just asking for an exorbitant price, it was robbery, a blatant robbery. How could Mi Kongquan agree to such a condition? Absolutely impossible. Mi Kongquan vetoed. The luminary paste is the imperial palace's secret medicine and His Majesty the Emperor controls it personally. You're not just making things difficult for me, you have no intention of reconciling at all. Otherwise, why would you make such an impossible request? Mi Kongquan was the minister of imperial household after all. Even when he was at a disadvantage, he had long had the intention of reconciling. However, he rejected the harsh conditions directly with a resolute attitude. You want to exchange for the luminary paste with a few thousand silver taels? Isn't it too cheap? You're the ones who kidnapped them. Even the greediest robber in this world would never make such a request. Qiu Yunsan chuckled darkly. Others might not be able to do it, but Keeper Mi must have a way. Even if Keeper Mi really doesn't have a solution, he has to think of a way to achieve it. There's no way around this. Mi Kongquan said, aren't the few of you thinking too highly of me? I'm the minister of imperial household, but I'm only a servant with a handicapped body. How can I have such a fantastic item like the luminary paste? If the few young masters insist on making things difficult for me, I'll gladly oblige. It's nothing more than a life-and-death struggle. If Yunyang had not mentioned the luminary paste, Qiu Yunsan and the other three young masters might have been fooled by Mi Kongquan's words without knowing it. Now, however, all these concerns were gone. The only thing that filled the ears of the four young masters was the luminary paste. To these four fellows who were almost drained by wine and women, no treasure in this world could compare to the luminary paste's allure. With such an enticement in front of them, it would be worth it even if they had to gamble with their lives. Chun Wanfeng snorted and said, is Keeper Mi's declaration to fight with his life on the line? It's a pity that the four of us have never been afraid of this, nor are we easily intimidated. If Keeper Mi is determined to do so, we'll make a big scene here tonight. Xia Bingchuan chuckled darkly. That's right. Perhaps we can't keep Keeper Mi here with our combined strength, but none of Keeper Mi's clansmen can live. Right. Keeper Mi, even if you can escape with your life, I don't know how many % of your life is left. Is it 10% or 20%? So what if I manage to escape with my life? After this battle, we're all enemies of life and death. We, the four noble families, will hunt you down immediately. We won't rest until we're dead. Dong Tianling raised his head gracefully. I can say here and now that we'll find you before you've recovered from your injuries, you'll be sent to the underworld. The four of us are willing to swear to the heavens that we'll work together to make this claim. Qiu Yunsan said. Therefore, if Keeper Mi isn't willing to take out the luminary paste to express his sincerity, then there's nothing to talk about. Chun Wanfeng said, even if you don't fight with your life, we won't let you go. With an irresistible temptation before them, these four fellows spoke one after another, trying their best to put on a show. Every word they uttered hit the nail on the head, showcasing the domineering nature of the young masters of noble families. Mi Kongquan was extremely miserable, his anger growing. However, he felt more aggrieved than the other two as he said angrily, what you're asking for is the luminary paste. Was that something simple? That's the imperial family's top secret medicine. Although the yin-yang snake's inner core can be made into the luminary paste, it can only produce 10 portions of it every year. Any more and it won't be effective. If it's 1 or 2 portions, I'll think of something. Perhaps there's still room for negotiation, but you're asking for 5 portions? Isn't this asking for too much? We don't care. Dong Tianling was unreasonable. This is the only condition. If you agree to it, we'll shake hands and talk. If you don't, we'll fight to the death. Mi Kongquan's eyes were about to spit fire as he glared at Dong Tianling, not speaking for a long time. After a long time, he suddenly turned around. Pa, the 3 eunuchs behind him were all killed in the time it takes for a spark to fly off a piece of flint. Their brains burst open and they died on the ground. Chapter 114. Mi Kongquan's gaze was as sharp as a blade as it swept across their faces. All of them felt as if their faces had been slashed by a steel saber, it was so sharp that it hurt. Nice. Xiao Yunsan was delighted as he waved his hand. Release them. Mi Kongquan snorted coldly and sprung up. He made a turn in the air and disappeared without a trace. He did not even have the patience to take another look at these people. If it wasn't for his unfinished business, he would have disregarded everything and attacked with all his strength. Even if he had to flee to the ends of the world, he would kill all 4 of these annoying fellows to vent the anger in his heart. Got it. The luminary paste is in my hands. Xiao Yunsan leaped high, beaming with delight. Dong Tianling and the other 2 were beaming with delight as well, immeasurably satisfied. I didn't expect this old thing to actually have the ability to obtain the Empire of Yutong's royalties exclusive item, it's true. If it weren't for Boss Reminder, we wouldn't have thought of this at all. It's all thanks to Boss. Boss is our lucky star, it's really great. I must marry a few more concubines when I go back. I used to worry that I'd be too frivolous and play myself to death. It's all right now. I don't have to worry anymore. What about the extra portion? Chun Wanfeng asked. Why is there an extra portion? Including Boss, isn't it better if each of us gets one? Dong Tianling glared at him. Idiot, what do you mean? Chun Wanfeng shook his head quickly. That's exactly what I meant. I'm only saying this to test you all, to see if you're sincere towards Boss. Tisk, the 3 of them scoffed. Anyone could see that Chun Wanfeng had other ideas just now, but of course, he would not expose them now. Yunyang snorted and said, it's a shame that you all still have some conscience. Keep it for yourselves. If I'm not mistaken, I wouldn't dare to eat the luminary paste even if he really sent it over this time. Why? Dong Tianling asked, would he dare to poison it? Why doesn't he dare to poison it? Yunyang snorted, 99% of the reason I dare not kill all of you today is because I'm wary of old Marshal Chiu and the 4 noble families' follow-up tactics. However, if all of you were to die a few days later, it would be reasonable for the old man in the palace to say that he didn't know. Even if your family wants to vent their anger on me, my cultivation is still intact, and there is life everywhere. What's more, as long as the 4 of you are confirmed to be dead, the other party will immediately disappear. The sky is high and the earth is high, but where will you find them? Yunyang looked at the 4 fellows in exasperation. Do you lot roam the martial world so carelessly? It's just a small profit, and you've completely obliterated your vigilance? The 4 of them were dumbfounded and looked at each other. No. It can't be. Chun Wanfeng opened his mouth like a catfish. He swore to the heavens just now, heh. Yunyang waved his hand and turned to leave. I know all of you can't let go of your obsession with obtaining the luminary paste, but be careful no matter how you look forward to it. Maybe the luminary paste is the real thing, just that it's mixed with something else. What if someone dies after eating it? Listening to Yunyang's alarmist talk, the popinjays looked as if they had been struck by lightning. It couldn't be. They had gone through so much to get their hands on the legendary luminary paste for men, but there was actually something fishy about it. When they came back to their senses, Yunyang had already disappeared. Boss words must be reasonable. Dong Tianling said, when the luminary paste comes 3 days later, I won't eat it immediately. I'll keep it first. If you lot aren't afraid, you can eat it first. The other 3 were fuming. King Dong Tianling, are you asking us to test the poison for you? Yunyang had left quickly. Just as he exited the alley, he swiftly executed his movement skill and left. At this moment, Yunyang had a vague feeling that someone was waiting for him. Someone was waiting for him. No, it should be said that the person had never left but had been eyeing him. Since you haven't left and have a vengeful heart, this young master will not let go of this opportunity tonight. I can play with you to my heart's content. As expected, as he walked out and headed in the direction of the residence of Yun, the feeling of being followed became clearer and clearer along the way. It also became more and more familiar. Yun-yang continuously cultivated the fog of cloud conjuration as he walked. When he passed by a corner, he waved his hands casually and a few white silhouettes left his side without a sound, swiftly blending into the darkness of the night. One of the white silhouettes sprinted towards the residence of Yun like an arrow. Yun-yang was halfway there. Just as he was about to turn the next corner, he suddenly stopped and scratched his head, muttering in annoyance, "What kind of memory is this? I've forgotten again." He turned around and walked back. It seemed like he was going back to get something. Those who were watching him in the dark cursed out loud. F***ck, this bastard was about to reach the perfect ambush spot that he had set up. Why did he turn back? He was walking rather fast too. Fine, your father will chase after him and kill him. With a swoosh, he flew up to the roof soundlessly and covered 100 feet. After a few leaps, he felt that he was already in front of Yun-yang and stretched his head to look. Yun-yang, who was walking over, suddenly slapped his head and heaved a long sigh. I'm really stupid. Do I have to go back tonight to get it? It won't delay me even if I go tomorrow. The road is not close. Standing on the road, he pondered for a while, scratching his ears and cheeks. Finally, he turned back. I'd better go home first, wash up and sleep. Then, he took large strides forward. The person in the dark was so angry that his lungs were about to explode when he saw this. F***ck, how could this bastard achieve anything with such an indecisive attitude? However, no matter how easy the target was, he had no choice but to sneak back. Yun-yang came near the corner again. When he was about 100 feet away, he suddenly stopped and looked to the side. Hey, why is there a kitten here? I can bring it back to keep the few at home company. The person in the dark was infuriated and piqued. Indeed, there was a small, white thing at the corner of the wall. This young master Yun-yang had actually gone to catch the kitten. The kitten seemed to be a little difficult to catch. Yun-yang had gone around it a few times but could not even catch a strand of its fur. In the end, he had to use mystical qi to restrain the kitten. As he held it in his arms, he was actually comforting it with a gentle voice. It was a very pretentious act. Little fellow, how obedient would you have been if you had done this earlier? Isn't that right? Isn't it more comfortable to be hugged by me than on the cold ground? You're such an ignorant little fellow. Sigh, I'm doing a good deed by bringing you back today. Kitty, you don't know, but I saw a few eunuchs tonight, and they were so disgusting. Ah, the smell on your body. The person in the dark was so furious that he fell back. He really wanted to rush forward and ask Yun-yang, Yun-yang, are you sick? Are you? Are you? That was more than enough. However, Yun-yang had to walk over eventually. He walked slowly with his head lowered, one hand caressing the little white kitten in his arms lovingly as he murmured, Kitten, shall I give you a name? You'll follow me from now on. Big White? You don't like it? Xiaobai? Xiao Xiaobai? 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 White Tail? F***ck, none of these are okay, you don't like them? Why don't I give you a name? I've seen this person tonight. How about you call me Old Wu, the eunuch? Kitten, you're a female, almost the same as Old Wu. Actually, you're more complete than him. With a clatter, the person in the dark gritted his teeth, almost breaking his molars. He could not hold it in anymore. Although Yun-yang was still 30 to 40 feet away from the corner where the ambush was set up, the person in the dark did not want to wait any longer. The murderous intent in him was boiling like never before and could no longer be suppressed. If he did not kill this man, he would not be human. With a swoosh, the person leaped down from the high wall at the corner like a bolt of lightning. His high-speed movements left a trail of afterimages in the air as a gleaming saber light flashed like a bolt of lightning in the cloudy sky. The chilling murderous intent caused the wind in the night sky to stop flowing temporarily. Yunyang, who was faced with the sudden killing intent, seemed to be taken aback as he tossed the kitten in his arms away. "Oh my God, there's an assassin!" Then, he moved swiftly, obviously intending to evade the killing intent before him. Although Yunyang's response was not exactly brilliant, it was still acceptable. He might have been able to evade an ordinary assassin, but the person in the dark had planned for such a long time to kill him. How could he evade it so easily? Swoosh! The saber light glinted as it pierced through Yunyang's right shoulder. That's right, it pierced through without any hindrance. However, the assassin who had succeeded in his attack was stunned. What was going on? It was a vital point, but why was there no force behind it? How could this be? What was going on? The answer was revealed right away. Yunyang, who was perfectly fine, had already appeared on the other side. The only difference was that there was a saber in his hand. As soon as the saber appeared, its sharpness was unparalleled, causing the moonlight in the sky to lose its luster. Although the assassin was still baffled by what had just happened, he did not hesitate at all. His body flashed like a phantom and he was already in front of Yunyang. He swung his saber straight down, but there was no sound of wind being sliced through. The speed of this slash seemed to be faster than the previous one. With a flick of Yunyang's wrist, the saber light filled the night sky like a peacock spreading its tail. Chapter 115. The chilling saber light appeared for the first time, like the stars in the sky blinking coldly as they fell from all directions. The assassin exclaimed in surprise at the sight of such a strange move. As a high-level martial artist, his instincts told him that the other party's saber had actually covered all of his openings. If he had not retracted his saber, he might have been able to injure Yunyang severely, but his opponent's saber could definitely kill him. What kind of saber skill was this? How could there be such a dazzling and incisive saber skill in this world? My cultivation base is at least 3 levels higher than this fellow's. Logically speaking, even if I stood still, he might not be able to hurt me. Why does it make me feel like my life is being threatened now? He took a step back almost instinctively, the saber in his hand turning outwards to defend himself. He could only feel a gust of chilly wind flashing past him. With a crack, his saber snapped in half without any sign of resistance. The chilly wind blew against his face. Shocked, he took 3 steps back like a phantom, narrowly avoiding the saber that was aimed at his life. He could no longer maintain his illusory form, allowing Yunyang to see his true form for the first time. Yunyang chuckled, "It really is you." The assassin was Eunuch Wu. He had not even changed out of his eunuch robe. Eunuch Wu, who was 50 feet away, was like a wandering spirit in the night. His eyes under his brows were flickering like will-o'-the-wisp as he stared at Yunyang eerily and suddenly asked, "What is this skill? What saber skill? What saber?" Yunyang said lightly, "This is called destiny. Destiny's movement, Destiny's saber truth, Destiny's saber truth, Destiny's saber. In other words, this saber is in my hands. Avoiding your assassination and then killing you, it's all destiny." What Yunyang had said was the absolute truth, but with his tone of voice, it was filled with a different kind of meaning. Eunuch Wu's grayish-white brows arched as he said faintly, "I see." Suddenly, his body floated up again like a ghost. In an instant, his body turned into countless phantoms. One by one, the phantoms appeared and then disappeared in the air. It was hard to tell what was real and what was real. "I want to see whether your so-called heavens will favor me or you in the end." He casually tossed the remaining half of the broken saber onto the ground. He had used this saber for countless years and had accompanied him through life and death thousands of times, throwing it away like a pair of worn-out shoes. To a first-rate assassin like Eunuch Wu, things that could not be used were just trash. why would he care about throwing them away? Chi chi chi, a series of explosions rang out in the air. Eunuch Wu's hands turned into eagle claws and attacked Yun Yang without a trace. Yun Yang did not even spare it a glance. It was still the same style, merciless blade. Eunuch Wu retracted his hand and retreated as fast as lightning. He shook his head and said, "Still not enough." After thinking for a moment, Xiao Chen's body suddenly turned into flowing water as he flew over. His palms landed lightly, but they carried a tremendous force. Yun Yang did the same, executing merciless blade again. Although it was already his third time using it, Yun Yang felt that he had gained a deeper understanding of this saber style each time he used it. Especially when he was facing the immense pressure of a mortal enemy, the realization was especially profound. This time, there was an additional ray of starlight amidst the saber light that resembled the stars. Chi chi. Eunuch Wu was forced to retreat once again. Looking at the front of his shirt that had been torn by the saber's blade, he could not help but feel a chill in his heart. How could this be? He had been through hundreds of battles and his cultivation base had reached the pinnacle of his life, reaching the pinnacle of the 7th level mystical chi. Yet, this child from the Yun family before him was only at the 3rd or 4th level mystical chi. The gap between their cultivation base was like heaven and earth. Yet, the other party had a saber in his hand and was able to hold him off with a single move. There was even a risk of him getting hurt if he forced his way in. It was inconceivable. Yun Yang sucked in a deep breath. The 3 consecutive slashes just now were marvelous and flawless, but his mystical chi was on the brink of exhaustion due to the exertion. Luckily, Emmy was there to provide continuous support, but this situation could not last long. Emmy's support had its limits as well. Yun Yang estimated that he would be completely drained after 2 more slashes. Yun Yang could not help but feel a strong sense of helplessness. He could clearly feel that if he had enough power, even if he had a 6th heaven beginner cultivation base, a single merciless blade would definitely be able to slice this powerful enemy in half in an instant. There was an endless murderous intent and a sure kill move, but such a godly skill could only protect himself when facing an enemy 3 levels higher than him. As he pondered, Eunuch Wu suddenly sneered and said faintly, "Young Master Yun, prepare to die." He leaped into the air and floated 20.5 feet in mid-air, his palm striking down. Air-rending palm. There was still a distance of 20 feet between them, but Yun Yang could already feel a strong, forceful force coming at him. Raising his saber to block the attack, Yun Yang was forced to take 5 steps back with a loud boom. His chest felt like it had been struck by lightning, his face pale. Eunuch Wu saw that a close-range attack was not going to work, so he resorted to a long-range mystical chi attack that consumed the most cultivation base. This was also the attack that Yun Yang could not defend against at the moment. No matter how sharp your saber is, no matter how strong your saber skill is, when faced with such an overwhelming force. Eunuch Wu cackled, "What use is your endless techniques? Tonight, this old man will teach you a lesson before you die." Yun Yang suppressed the churning chi and blood in his chest and said with a faint smile, "You're only a crippled eunuch. What right do you have to call yourself an old man? Do you know what a husband means? Do you have the right to be a husband? Do you have the capital?" The viciousness of the words was no doubt worse than a million curses to Eunuch Wu. His ruddy face instantly turned ghastly pale. Then, it turned ashen. His entire being fell silent, the murderous intent in his eyes overflowing. His rage had reached its peak, but he did not say a word. He took 3 steps in the air, and with these 3 steps, 3 powerful gusts of wind from his palms came hurtling towards Yun Yang. Yun Yang was like a withered leaf in the wind, retreating lightly. In an instant, he flew 150 feet away with the wind. In spite of this, the other party's mystical chi did not diminish. Separated by hundreds of feet, there were still ripples that struck the divine edge. Barf! Yunyang threw his head back and spat out a mouthful of blood. He staggered, almost losing his footing. Eunuch Wu cackled, his laughter laced with endless resentment. He chased after Yunyang like a shadow. "Young Master Yun, let this crippled eunuch send you on your way. Although I'm crippled, I'm still alive in this world. Young Master Yun, you, who have all 5 parts of your body, can only go to the netherworld. Have a safe journey." He raised his palm like a saber and slammed it down ferociously. Boom! A loud explosion resounded. Eunuch Wu's scrawny body flew 30 feet away like a kite with a broken string. In front of Yunyang, there was a muscular silhouette that stood tall like a towering mountain. The newcomer was dressed in black, his gaze fixed on Eunuch Wu like lightning. A disdainful smirk hung at the corners of his lips. "A eunuch actually wants to send my young master on his way? You've overestimated yourself." It was Fang Mafei. Behind him was Whitey III, who was panting heavily. Eunuch Wu was shocked. The person before him was full of vigor, the force of his palm strike earlier was like a tsunami, his cultivation base was definitely not lower than his own. "Who are you?" "My surname is Mei." A cold voice replied faintly, "I'll send you on your way. What's the point of living when your body is crippled? The sooner you die, the sooner you can reincarnate." Eunuch Wu spun around like a whirlwind and struck with his palm. With a bang, one of the people behind him took 3 steps back. His body rolled like a flood dragon that was rolling in the clouds. His palm was like a sharp horn that suddenly pierced through the air. Single-horned flood dragon, Mei Wenjian. Eunuch Wu roared, punching and kicking. "Residents of Yun's butler, it's actually you." Lao Mei snorted. "So what if it's your old man?" Without dodging at all, the two of them rolled around and fought each other. Fang Mafei's muscular form soared into the air, his palms were like mountain-splitting axes, striking continuously. 2 experts had joined forces to attack Eunuch Wu. Eunuch Wu had already expended a lot of energy in his battle with Yunyang earlier. Even if he were to face Fang Mafei alone, he would not be able to do so. What was more, there was still Lao Mei, who was not much weaker than Fang Mafei. With an angry roar, he punched Lao Mei and kicked Fang Mafei. His body spun like a whirlwind as he flew into the air. Both of his hands struck out continuously. It was as if he had transformed into a 1,000-armed devil. Pfft! Eunuch Wu spat a mouthful of blood, but he managed to break free from the 2 men's encirclement. He said hoarsely, "I shall seek revenge for today." Meow. With a cat's meow, a white silhouette appeared out of thin air like a bolt of lightning, 2 sharp front claws swiping down. A mere lightning, Eunuch Wu snorted coldly and punched. However, the cat that had pounced over suddenly let out a shrill cry, "Meow." He shook his head and swung his tail. With a howl, the fist-sized cat head suddenly grew to the size of a wash basin. When he opened his mouth was even bigger than his head. His white fangs flashed with a steel-like sharpness. He met Eunuch Wu's right fist head-on and bit down ferociously. Eclipse Panther. Eunuch Wu was scared out of his wits in that instant. He desperately tried to retract his fist. Even though he reacted quickly, he was still bitten. His fist was drenched in blood and the pain penetrated deep into his bones. This unforeseen event happened right in front of them, and it was extremely sudden. With a meow, it was an eclipse panther that had pounced over. Eunuch Wu felt his mind go blank. Chapter 116. Seeing that the path ahead was blocked, Eunuch Wu retreated quickly in an attempt to find another way to escape. In spite of that, the leopard in the air did not stop its attack after injuring its enemy. It opened its mouth again and a ray of green light shot out from its throat. Swoosh! Eunuch Wu could no longer evade the ambush as his chest exploded with a pop. The green light then turned into a storm of sharp blades that blossomed in all directions. Ah! Eunuch Wu howled. Almost his entire chest had been torn apart by the wind blades. Blood dripped everywhere as white bone stubs were exposed. The little fellow in the air swayed before it fell with a shake of its head. It was a cub after all, so it could only strike once. Fang Mafei had traversed hundreds of feet like a bolt of lightning, his body as heavy as a mountain. With a shout, 19 consecutive punches fell like 19 heavy hammers. Behind him, Lao Mei appeared like a phantom. The sword in his hand glinted coldly as it turned into 3 rays of light, aiming for Eunuch Wu's back. In an instant, Eunuch Wu, who had been severely injured, was attacked from the front and back at the same time. His life was at stake. Eunuch Wu was naturally unwilling to resign himself to his fate. With a shrill howl, his body spun and his legs danced like a whirlwind. In an instant, he kicked Ma Fei's fists a dozen times. His right hand shook and a knife appeared in his hand as if it had materialized out of thin air. Clang, 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 clang. He exchanged 3 blows with Lao Mei. Fang Mafei's strength, Lao Mei's strength, and Eunuch Wu's own recoil force mixed together to form a gravitational whirlpool. Yun Yang, who wanted to finish off the attack, could no longer do so. If he intervened now, it would be equivalent to attacking 3 people at the same time. Not only would his own attack be weakened, he would also have to bear the recoil of the 3 people's combined strength. The loss outweighed the gain. It was better to stay put than to move. He had to observe the situation and find a good opportunity to strike. The 3 people in the whirlpool roared in unison and attacked in a frenzy. This vortex was formed from the combined power of the 3 of them. If any one of them died, their power would collapse, and the vortex would disappear. To Mei and Fang, killing Eunuch Wu as soon as possible was naturally the best method. Naturally, they gave it their all and attacked madly. The pressure Eunuch Wu endured immediately skyrocketed. He was also a decisive person. A perfectly round arrow of blood suddenly sprayed out of his mouth. His face immediately became deathly pale. However, his body rushed into the sky like a sharp sword. Surprisingly, he had used a self-damaging method to forcefully combine the 3 forces into an upward force. Although he had to bear the most direct impact, his entire body flew more than 200 feet in an instant, escaping the range of the vortex where the 3 forces converged. Mei and Fang, on the other hand, were temporarily trapped in the vortex and could not escape immediately. At this moment, Eunuch Wu finally felt relieved. As long as he changed his direction in midair, he would be able to escape unscathed. Who would have thought that he would be reduced to such a state just to take revenge on a youth who had humiliated him? He had to be careful in the future. Perhaps, now that the 2 experts were trapped in the vortex, there was still a sliver of space left. Should he try to ambush Yun Yang and end this trouble once and for all? Just as Eunuch Wu was hesitating, a small white silhouette suddenly appeared in front of him. Another snow-white kitten the size of a palm appeared in front of him. Meow. Eunuch Wu was shocked at first, but then he recalled that the Eclipse Panther had already exhausted its energy and was powerless. It was already a great fortune to have one Eclipse Panther, a 9th-level mystical beast. Who could be so amazing as to have 2 at the same time? It was impossible. Childish. Eunuch Wu snorted coldly. Do you think you can fool this old man? He punched out fiercely. He was confident that this punch of his could turn the lightning cat in front of him into minced meat. However, there were some things that one would not believe until it happened. Meow. The kitten in front of him meowed loudly. Suddenly, with a shake of its head, a huge panther head appeared, its fangs glaring as it bit down viciously. Arg! Eunuch Wu was scared out of his wits. Was it really an Eclipse Panther? Arg! With a loud crack, Eunuch Wu, who was severely injured and could not react in time, was no longer as lucky as before. His right hand was bitten off with a loud crack. However, the little leopard also let out a miserable howl, and its body was sent flying like a ball. In its mouth was Eunuch Wu's complete right hand. Although Eunuch Wu was heavily injured, he still had some strength left in him. The force of the punch had still managed to push the little panther back. Eunuch Wu, who had lost an arm, howled into the sky as he staggered backward in the air, falling straight down. On the other side, Yunyang had already sprung up to catch the falling panther in his arms. He tossed Eunuch Wu's right hand away in disdain and hugged the little panther in his arms, his heart aching. The little panther meowed and fell unconscious in Yunyang's arms. Eunuch Wu was still descending when another white shadow flashed in front of him. Another junior leopard appeared in front of him, its eyes full of anger. "This old bastard, how dare you hurt my two brothers? Go to hell." The little panther shook its head and tail as it growled. It opened its mouth and a green glow appeared. As expected, a ball of wind blades flew out. "There's actually another one." Eunuch Wu was filled with despair. Had I fallen into an eclipse panther's nest tonight? Why are there so many of these things? However, the ball of wind blades was already in front of him. Eunuch Wu could not dodge or counterattack in time. He closed his eyes and roared, activating all of his mystical chi, potential, and life force. Poof, 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 his neck, chest, shoulders, and face were all drenched in blood. His face was almost stripped of flesh while one of his eyes was struck by a wind blade with a howl. A puddle of black water splattered, one of his eyeballs had been blown out. Eunuch Wu cried out in agony as he fell. Suddenly, with a long howl, his entire body burst forth with a bright brilliance. His entire body was enveloped in a layer of green light. He was like a meteor in the sky, dragging a long tail behind him as he rushed out at an extremely fast speed. It's meteorite soul ignition. Fang Mafei, who had just escaped the whirlpool of energy, could not catch up. Eunuch Wu's current speed had far exceeded the limits of a human speed and was still accelerating. It was difficult to catch up. "Young master, dodge. That's the astral soul fusion arcane art." Fang Mafei knew that it was impossible, but he still chased after the eunuch with all his might. At the same time, he shouted a warning, his face drenched in sweat. Astral soul fusion arcane art. This was the ultimate method of turning a person's life force into a shooting star in the sky for the final blow. With such extreme speed, it could even kill someone 3 levels higher. It was indestructible. There was almost no speed that could match the speed of this technique. After this technique, the bearer would have to pay the price of having his blood and life force depleted, his meridians ruptured. Even if God of Zenith wanted to save him, it would be futile. However, there had never been a case of failure when this move was used to recoup his losses. Fang Mafei had never thought that this eunuch who had always been in the palace would possess such an arcane skill. What was more, he had suddenly executed it and turned the tables around. In the blink of an eye, Eunuch Wu was already in front of Yunyang. He did not slow down at all as he charged straight at Yunyang. Even if it was a city wall, he would have made a huge hole in it. However, at this critical moment, Yunyang, who was right in front of him, suddenly disappeared. He had disappeared. He had completely disappeared. What replaced him was a thick cloud of fog. Eunuch Wu's charging figure passed through the cloud of fog without any obstruction. The only damage he had done was to puncture a huge hole in the cloud of fog and take away a large portion of it. That was all. Eunuch Wu's body suddenly stopped after traveling another 100 feet or so. He seemed to have thought of something and fell into a state of shock that he had never experienced before. Like a puppet, he slowly turned around and stared at the cloud mist that had yet to dissipate. There was still a big hole in it. His only remaining eye revealed a look of disbelief. Lao Mei and Fang Mafei had arrived as well. The two of them stared blankly at the cloud with their 4 eyes, only feeling that their minds were in a mess. The cloud of fog thickened and Yun Yang's silhouette gradually reappeared. The cloud of fog that Eunuch Wu had taken away returned to them in wisps as Yun Yang's silhouette gradually became clearer. When the cloud of fog had completely disappeared, Yun Yang stood on the ground weakly in his purple robe. His face was pale and his eyes were lifeless. The three of them could clearly hear the sound of his panting. However, he was still standing, still alive. Even though he looked dispirited, he was still standing. Eunuch Wu's single eye was filled with disbelief, astonishment, shock, and a hint of genuine fear. Eunuch Wu stammered, Supreme Cloud? Slowly, Yun Yang straightened himself. His straight back was like a sharp sword that soared into the sky, its sharpness shining brightly. His gaze became weary but dignified as he said faintly, "That's right, I'm Supreme Cloud." Ha! Cough cough. Hee hee. Ha ha ha. Eunuch Wu choked and coughed as blood gushed out of his mouth. His blood contained countless pieces of internal organs, but he kept laughing. A miserable smile, a self-mocking smile. His voice was weak, and his life force was like a candle in the wind. I didn't expect to die in the hands of the legendary Lord Supreme Cloud today. It's truly a blessing of 3 lifetimes. This life has not been in vain. Eunuch Wu's eyes were dim. I've worked so hard, but in the end, it's all for naught. The light in his eyes dimmed rapidly as his voice grew weaker. Yun Yang took a step forward, his voice steady. Eunuch Wu, tell me who you are. Eunuch Wu shook his head slowly and murmured, is there still meaning to it? What month and what day are you? Yun Yang asked. Chapter 117. Before he could finish his sentence, Eunuch Wu's body swayed and fell forward. First, he knelt on the ground. His calves and knees were crushed at the same time. Then, his whole body fell forward and lay on the ground. His head rolled out of his body. His life force and potential had been completely exhausted. Even his deific consciousness and soul had gone through the meteor soul ignition. His body was like a cracked ceramic that would shatter at the slightest touch. Yun Yang sucked in a deep breath. Autumn had come, it was the Mid-Autumn festival of the 8th month. It was time for a reunion, it was obvious. Eunuch Wu's identity was the 15th of the 8th month. From spring to autumn. Yun Yang mumbled to himself, feeling more and more that the matter was a mystery to him. This man from the Hall of Autumn had died in his hands so inexplicably. The cause of it was a foolhardy test. It was an unexpected test for both parties. In spite of this, both Yun Yang and Eunuch Wu had not truly realized that the other was their true enemy. Yet, the victor of life and death had been decided just like that. Yun Yang turned around. He met Lao Mei and Fang Mafei's gazes that were filled with shock but also admiration and respect. You're Lord Supreme Cloud? Lao Mei stammered. Fang Mafei looked at Yun Yang with a burning gaze. Lord Supreme Cloud? Yun Yang sighed softly, countless memories seemed to flash through his eyes. Finally, he said in a lonesome voice, I am now, your young master Yun. Yes. Young master. At this moment, Fang Mafei and Lao Mei's bodies were ramrod straight. Both of their eyes were shining with a fiery radiance. They had never thought that the person they had been serving was the empire's guardian that the entire nation's people had gone crazy for and worshipped. Such a heroic figure was actually their young master. At this moment, they felt their blood rush to their throats. For a moment, they did not know what to say. It was as if an electric current had passed through their bodies. Supreme Cloud. Heavenly cloud. Fang Mafei and Lao Mei felt their eyes moisten at the same time. That was because he was excited, because he felt honored. After the grievous news of the 9 Supremes being attacked, the entire empire of Yutong seemed to be shrouded in a gloomy cloud. Everyone's mood was unprecedentedly heavy, so oppressed that they wanted to fight with their lives on the line. However, the moment he heard the name Supreme Cloud, that feeling vanished without a trace. It was as if the dark clouds that filled the sky had disappeared without a trace the moment these 2 words appeared. Realization dawned on both of them, especially Lao Mei. Why did Yunyang often disappear and reappear suddenly? Why were there no maids or servants in the mansion? Why was her young master always so mysterious? Now, there was an answer to all of this. The young master was Supreme Cloud. That night, the empire of Yutong's capital city was indeed turbulent. The 4 great young masters were going up against the imperial palace chief. More than half of the forces in the capital were paying close attention to the subsequent development of the situation. Although Mi Kongquan had personally confirmed that he had reconciled with the 4 fellows and that it was just a misunderstanding, none of the 4 eunuchs he brought out had returned. This was intriguing. For the imperial palace, this was not a small matter. No matter how Mi Kongquan was the imperial palace chief, no matter how powerful he had to give an explanation. As far as this matter was concerned, the 4 young masters were unscrupulous in their actions. This was pardonable and even understandable. In spite of this, Mi Kongquan had done it without any qualms, even mobilizing a large number of imperial guards. This was something to ponder. Early the next morning, the various forces who had been anticipating the subsequent developments were surprised to find that no one had mentioned the matter anymore. It was as if the huge incident last night was just a gentle breeze that passed without a trace. Xiao Jianhan was too lazy to say anything. At the same time, he was waiting for Keeper Mi's follow-up, observing the changes quietly. As for the others, not even the imperial censors who usually stirred up trouble had jumped out to accuse them. Even Xiao Jianhan felt that this matter was rather odd. Subconsciously, he exchanged a glance with Leng Daoyin, only to see that the latter's eyes were filled with confusion as well. Xiao Jianhan frowned at once. If he were to say that he had overlooked something while being part of the plot, Leng Daoyin, who was not part of it, would not have noticed it either. This matter was getting more and more out of hand. Yunyang went into cultivation mode immediately when he returned to his residence. The battle tonight had been full of twists and turns, far beyond Yunyang's expectations. Most importantly, his intention had never been to kill. He wanted to find out more about the mastermind behind this eunuch Wu. However, his initial intention had obviously fallen through. In spite of this, there was another unexpected gain in today's battle other than martial arts and destiny saber art. Eunuch Wu was actually from the Hall of Autumn. He had been dealing with the Hall of Spring all this while, but he could not get out of this circle. Now, someone from the Hall of Autumn had popped out of nowhere? It was a strange matter indeed. I believe that Mi Kongquan is from the Hall of Spring. Although this eunuch Wu is acquainted with him, he might not know the other's true identity. At least, Mi Kongquan doesn't know eunuch Wu's background. This eunuch Wu has never shown his true combat power in front of Mi Kongquan. I've used all my forces in today's battle, including the 3 Eclipse Panthers and myself. In the end, I could only kill eunuch Wu with a Pyrrhic victory. It's truly remarkable, and this is only the 15th of the 8th month of the Hall of Autumn. Yunyang felt the terror from the bottom of his heart. Although he had won the battle in the end, he had also paid a hefty price for using the Fog of Cloud conjuration to counter eunuch Wu's desperate attack. In addition, the 2 junior leopards needed to be healed. Yunyang went into closed-door cultivation immediately, channeling the air of vitality to heal them. Fang Mafei and Lao Mei found a secluded spot to meditate in the yard. Occasionally, they would open their eyes, feeling their blood boiling. Supreme Cloud. The young master was actually Supreme Cloud. This piece of news was still like a thunderclap, rumbling in the minds of the two people. Yunyang did not say anything more, but both of them chose to keep their mouths shut. What was Supreme Cloud's identity? Was there even a need to ask? This secret was enough to shake the entire continent. Once it was leaked, the consequences would be dire. What I yearn to see the most is the moment young master soars into the sky with the power of a hidden dragon. Fang Mafei and Lao Mei had the same thought. Just the thought of that moment made them tremble with excitement. However, the young master was Supreme Cloud. Then, the young master's enemy would be the entire continent. All the strong cultivators of the continent. No wonder young master always said that he was not capable enough, that he despised his slow progress. So this was the truth. Following young master, we need to improve our capabilities. This was a must. Therefore, both of them had entered a state of desperation that they had never experienced before in their cultivation. When he woke up the next day, Yunyang felt his body relax, his injuries fully healed. As for the two Eclipse Panthers, the one with the heaviest injuries had mostly recovered while the other was completely healed. Not slow. Yunyang opened the message sent by the Nine Heavens dictum. No ripples at all? Yunyang's brows slowly furrowed as he looked at the information he had gathered from all over the place. This did not seem to be normal. So many major incidents had happened in these few days. From the incident with Shui Yuehan and the others to Fu Guansan, all the way until now with Mi Kongxuan's incident, the accumulation of these incidents had not stirred up any ripples at all. Logically speaking, if it was just the imperial court, the residents of imperial justice, the board of justice, a few princes and even the civil, military and political parties in the imperial court, when the censors were at their fiercest, they should be attacking each other. You attack while I defend, it was a back-and-forth tussle. Slowly digging forward amidst such disputes was the right thing to do. However, now, such a major incident had not stirred up any ripples at all. What did this mean? It meant that all these incidents that should have happened had been suppressed by a large hand. Suppressed forcefully. However, who in the capital city had such power? Yunyang sucked in a deep breath. No matter what, the Cirrus House's incident could finally come to an end. As long as these four popinjays were still in Tiantang, the Four Seasons Tower would not dare to act recklessly, at least for the time being. After all, 5 people had been killed in the Cirrus House's incident. Just the follow-up countermeasures alone would take them some time to think. Finally, I can relax, just as Yunyang was thinking about this, tens of thousands of miles away, on a cliff shrouded in clouds and mist. A man dressed in gray sat there quietly. 5 to 6 thick iron chains hung on his body, dark red in color. In the middle of them were strips of dark red mystical beast tendons. 2 chains passed through his shoulders and shoulder blades. The 3rd chain passed through his chest and wrapped around his spine. Then, it extended out into a bottomless cave. Even so, it was not enough. There was a similar chain on each of his legs. One could only imagine the torment this man had endured. Right now, he was sitting in front of the stone table with a tranquil expression, slowly making tea and drinking tea. Facing the dense and impenetrable sea of clouds, he still had a calm expression on his face. Chapter 118. Like an immortal descending from the heavens, he descended calmly, his sleeves fluttering in the wind. He was indescribably otherworldly. However, his face was covered by a glittering golden mask. It gave one the appearance of extreme coldness and chilled one's heart. He flew over and landed on the cliff. His gaze flickered as he looked at the shackled man in gray with a gentle smile. "Brother Gu, it's been many years since we last met. I'm relieved that you're still as elegant as before." The man in gray said faintly, "If I remove these chains, I'll let you know that I'm even more elegant than before." The man in white laughed. His clothes were as white as snow, untainted by even a speck of dust. His voice was elegant. "Please forgive me, Brother Gu. I can't do such a foolish thing." The gray-clothed man laughed as well. "You're a complete bastard. Tell me, what's the matter? Or perhaps you're just here to visit your prisoner?" The man in white said, "It's still that matter. Brother Gu, you should understand why I'm here now." "I don't." "Please explain." The man in white said, "The Great Heaven Lock Formation that day locked an area of 1,000 miles around Tianxian Cliff. It took me decades of treasures to completely imprison the 9 little fellows' shape-shifting abilities and capture them in one fell swoop. You told me that I can rest easy from now on. However, the situation may not be so optimistic now." The man in gray lifted his eyelids and said faintly, "Not optimistic? Didn't you promise me that day that you'll return my freedom after that? Did you do it? Brother Gu, you understand me." The man in white said sincerely, "You're extremely resourceful. How would I dare to let you go so recklessly? You should understand my choice." The man in gray smiled. "That's right, you wouldn't dare to let me go." There was a hint of pity in his eyes. "As for the 9 little fellows, I've actually told you long ago that everything is God's will. How can I believe in God's will?" The man in white stood on the edge of the cliff with his arms behind his back. His sleeves fluttered and rustled. The surrounding clouds gathered again but were completely dispersed by his breath. "Brother Gu, you said that year that when the 9 Supremes returned, the world would be turned upside down, and the martial world would be dominated by you." The man in white spoke word by word. "I asked you back then, would there be only one person left in the 9 Supremes? Tell me, no." He suddenly turned his head and looked at the man in gray. "Now, tell me again. Yes or no?" The gray-clothed man smiled and said, "This is a heavenly secret that cannot be revealed." A gentle smile appeared in the eyes of the man in white. "Brother Gu, you're forcing me." The man in gray lowered his gaze and said lightly, "Everything is destined by the will of the heavens, and it is also the calamity of my life." The man in white kept quiet for a moment before saying, "Brother Gu, you only have to tell me the truth. Which Supreme is still alive among the 9 Supremes?" The man in gray's brows twitched as his gaze froze for a moment, but he still smiled faintly. "I can only tell you that you won't be able to find him. That's all." The white-robed man let out a long howl, and all the clouds and fog within a circular area of 1,000 lis rose into the air with a bang. The clouds and fog in such a large area were all stirred up by his howl, and they rose thousands of feet into the air. The entire field of vision instantly became clear. The surrounding mountains were lush and lush, forming a beautiful picture. So beautiful. The man in gray looked at the mountains that had suddenly revealed themselves in a daze and murmured, "This is the secular world." His eyes turned half a circle to look at the man in white by the cliff and said softly, "This is the secular world." The man in white let out a long howl, releasing all the frustrations in his chest and regaining his initial composure. He smiled faintly and said, "That's right. What I've encountered is the secular world, what you've encountered is also the secular world. However, our temperaments are different, and so are our states of mind." The man in gray smiled faintly. "That's right. The tea has already cooled before the person has left." The man in white sneered and said, "That's why Brother Gu, your name is really good. Gu Chaoyang is only watching coldly from the sidelines. The tea that belongs to you is slowly cooling down. There's no taste of tea anymore." The man in gray shook his head and said softly, the tea is cold, but the fragrance is still there. The fragrance doesn't dissipate, but it's in the heart." He lifted his head to look at the man in white. "The tea is cold for me and you, but the tea is still boiling for the others. The fragrance of the tea is still distant, undiminished by thousands of mountains and rivers. The man in white laughed. "Brother Gu, we've been brothers for many years, we're very close. I really don't want to torment you. I only need you to tell me this." The man in gray said faintly, "The tea is cold. Do you still believe what I said?" The man in white was stunned. The man in gray said, "If I told you that the 9 Supremes are all dead, would you believe me? If I told you that someone is still alive, would you believe me?" The man in white said, "I can buy your information." The man in gray sighed softly and said, "Heaven's Inquisition is dead. Who are you going to buy it from?" "But Gu Chaoyang is still alive." The man in white said, "Then tell me, is anyone from the 9 Supremes still alive?" The man in gray nodded faintly. "I've told you before, everything is God's will." The man in white guffawed. This young brother has never believed in God's will. With a guffaw, he suddenly soared into the sky and turned into a cloud in the sky. His voice boomed like thunder, coming down from the 9 heavens. "The 9 Supremes are not dead, they must be Yutong's men. Then, as long as I kill all of Yutong's men, the world will be at peace. Even if the world is picturesque, what's the harm of death? Seeing the devastation, my heart is at ease, ha ha ha." The laughter faded away. The man in gray closed his eyes and murmured, "The wine of 1,000 years of worldly affairs is still fragrant, the tea of a lifetime of life is still warm." His desolate form floated up slowly, carrying the 5 chains with him, but he drifted into the cave as if he was weightless. There was not the slightest sound of the chains clashing. Only a desolate chant could be heard. "The 9 Supremes hold the world in their hands, the clouds and mist of heaven and earth are at their mercy." When Yunyang walked out of the door, he saw a middle-aged man in his 30s on the street placing a little girl with 2 braids, dressed in floral clothes, on his shoulder. Although he only had 1 arm left, he still held onto his daughter tightly. The little girl twisted her waist happily on her father's shoulder, her voice soft and coquettish as she giggled like silver bells. The man's face was filled with unconcealed affection. Everyone believed that as long as this man had something, he would give it to his daughter without reservation. In his heart, his daughter was the one and only treasure. She was his most precious little princess. "Daddy, Daddy, look over there, there's Candied Hawes." The little girl wriggled her body, giggling and squealing. All right, let's go take a look now." The man smiled contentedly and walked away with his daughter. Yunyang stood with his arms behind his back, his gaze seemingly looking into the distance. Actually, all of his attention from the corner of his eyes had been focused on the little girl. Deep in his eyes, there was a sense of envy that came from the bottom of his heart. "Daddy, Daddy, look over there, there's Candied Hawes." The words echoed in Yunyang's heart for a long time, a bitter smile hanging on the corners of his lips. Forget Candied Hawes, he might not even have the chance to call out to his father in this lifetime. He had never had such a chance. Fang Mafei, who was beside Yunyang, could acutely feel that there was an additional sense of loneliness emanating from his young master now. Yunyang, who had stopped for a long time, suddenly strode forward. Walking to the vendor selling Candied Hawes, Yunyang tossed a silver ingot and took a stick of Candied Hawes. The vendor called out for change behind him, but Yunyang was already far away. Yunyang brought the Candied Hawes to his mouth and took a careful bite. The sweet and sour taste seemed to seep into his heart as he murmured, "It's delicious." He walked forward leisurely, chewing on the Candied Hawes as if there was no one else around. In the depths of his eyes that no one could see, there was a deep pain that seemed to be trembling. Facing the morning sun, an indistinct mist seemed to rise from the corners of his eyes. Finally, when there was only one last Candied Hawes left, Yunyang wiped the skewer clean and carefully kept it, along with the last Candied Hawes, into his sleeves. He murmured, "Just take it that you all bought it for me." Facing the sun, he smiled brightly and said softly, "I'm living very well. Chapter 119. Yunyang first went to the west of the city and walked around the slums. Seeing the smiles on the faces of the disabled warriors, he felt much more at ease. He then went to the south of the city, then the east, west, and north. Yunyang walked very quickly. Each step seemed soft and relaxed, but in reality, he had already covered dozens of feet. Fang Mafei held his breath as he followed him, not leaving him by even an inch. It was also during this afternoon that many people in the capital city felt as if they had seen a young master. He had an extraordinary bearing and was tall and handsome. It was as if he had walked a circle in front of their eyes. Yunyang's pace was swift and he had the help of his lightness skill, but it was already midnight after he had walked around the entire Tiantang city. He had not done anything but walk around for the entire day. He was like a lonely lion that was silently patrolling his territory. With pride and loneliness, he looked at the people who lived and worked in peace under his wings with satisfaction. When he returned, Lao Mei came up to him with a pale face. "Old Marshal Chiu is here today." The corners of Yunyang's lips twitched. If it were not for him, he would have gone out for a whole day. He asked faintly, "What is it?" "I heard that you left early in the morning." Old Marshal was furious. Lao Mei looked conflicted. "Before he left, he shattered our stone lion with a slap." Looking at the shattered stone lion, the corners of Yunyang's lips twitched for a long time. Finally, he clapped his hands and praised, "Old Marshal is still strong despite his age. Congratulations." He paused for a moment before continuing, "Go and order 100 stone lions tomorrow. Place 2 of them here each time. When Old Marshal comes over, they'll appease him." Lao Mei's face was filled with shock. "You mean, you don't plan to see him anymore?" If Lao Mei did not know of Yunyang's other identity, he would have tried to dissuade him. However, Lao Mei's stance had changed. He stood firmly on Yunyang's side and approved of all of Yunyang's decisions. Even if the other party was Old Marshal Chiu, it would not matter. Thus, he skipped this topic and moved on to another visitor. General Tai Zheng was here too. Lao Mei said, he brought a few boxes of the border's specialty fruits for Marquis Yun. Yunyang sighed. "Tai Zheng, he's already so poor, why would he bring fruits? Where are the fruits?" He was eaten by those kittens." Lao Mei was speechless. Yunyang was exasperated as well. "Right, what did the old marshal say before he left?" "Cough, it's better if you don't convey it. It's better if I don't know about it." Yunyang had already changed his mind. "Let's eat." Eating is a serious matter. It was a pity that he couldn't stop eating. While they were eating, the 4 young masters came looking for them again. Boss, waha. I'm here again." Dong Tianling's unique voice was like a signature. Boss. Chun Wanfeng, Xia Bingchuan, Zhou Yunsan, and Dong Tianling. Spring, summer, autumn, and winter had all gathered here with Yunyang. Yunyang sighed. Looking at these 4 fellows, he could not help but think of the 4 Seasons Tower. "I knew boss was eating. The 4 of us haven't eaten either." Dong Tianling chuckled, purposely putting on a "I'm the closest to boss" attitude. He then turned around and called out, Steward, come, bring 4 more sets of cups and chopsticks. We're going to drink to our heart's content today, we won't go home until we're drunk." Lao Mei rolled his eyes at the fellow's lack of courtesy but went to get them anyway. After a while, Dong Tianling finally got to the point. "Boss, about the mystical beast you mentioned earlier, guaranteed." Yunyang did not beat around the bush. Then, the luminary paste, will there really be a problem? Zhou Yunsan asked hesitantly. "Have you gotten it?" Yunyang asked. "Not yet. All in all, it's better to be careful." Yunyang reminded, "Never let your guard down." The four of them nodded solemnly, lowering their heads to drink quietly. The excitement in their hearts had long dissipated. The atmosphere of the night was destined to be gloomy. Yunyang was in low spirits. Just as the five of them were drinking in silence, a ray of sword light flashed in the south of Tiantang City. A lean silhouette carrying a huge wine gourd on his back appeared in front of Tiantang City's gate, his gaze tinged with nostalgia. "I'm back again." He wondered how the young lady from back then was doing. "I've come back this time for something. Let's finish what we have to do and get the item first. After all, it can't be delayed any longer." The man smiled faintly. He glided into the city gate. Just as Yunyang and the rest were drinking and bantering, suddenly, bang, 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 someone knocked on the door. Someone called out from outside, "Excuse me, is young Master Yun at home?" It was already late at night. Lao Mei frowned and said, "This voice is rather familiar. It's the voice of Chen San whom young Master saved the other day." "Chen San?" Yunyang frowned. There must be something urgent for him to come so late at night. Let him in quickly. Not long after, Chen San came in hurriedly and knelt down. Young Master, please save my brothers," he kowtowed profusely. Yunyang frowned and said, "What happened? Stand up and speak." Yunyang could clearly see that Chen San was limping and his face was covered in scars. However, the scars seemed to have been there for quite some time. "Chen San." Yunyang's eyes shone with understanding. "Did you go to the battle with the remaining soldiers?" Chen San was stunned for a moment, then said in shame, "Young Master, please understand. Chen San did go to the battlefield, but I only met the enemy in one battle. Not only did I not kill a single enemy, but I came back covered in wounds. I've really lost face for young Master," Yunyang said seriously. "What are you saying? There are things a man shouldn't do, but there are things he must do. You're a man of steel when you go to battle. Whether you kill the enemy or not is insignificant. Have all the brothers who went with you returned?" The rims of Chen San's eyes reddened. "Young Master, Chen San is here because of this matter. After we retired from the army, we gathered together and lived together. Everyone looked out for each other and helped each other. Our days were bitter, but we lived in harmony. This time, our area also sent out 43 people. We lost 11 brothers in the previous battle, but 32 were lucky enough to return. But these few days, some of these brothers have been going missing. In the beginning, we thought they went out to catch up with their comrades after the battle, but more and more of them have been going missing, and they're all veterans who participated in the war." Chen San's voice was tearful. "As of tonight, 9 people have gone missing. We don't know what's going on, but we can vaguely feel that these missing brothers will never come back." He was trembling all over. As a disabled veteran at the bottom of society, his world was only so big. The only person he knew from the upper class was Yunyang, who had helped him when he was bullied. Now that something like this had happened, coming to Yunyang for help was the best he could do after a long period of hesitation. It was also the only life-saving straw in his heart. Yunyang stood up abruptly, his eyes glinting. "A large number of veterans have gone missing?" A murderous aura suddenly surged out. Dong Tianling and the other 3 who were closer to Yunyang shuddered without exception. How could such a murderous aura emanate from a young master of a noble family like Yunyang? It was the aura of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. "I'll go take a look." Yunyang stood up. "Let's go together." Dong Tianling and the rest stood up as well. "You don't have to go," Yunyang said calmly, "the more people, the bigger the target. If I really need your help, I'll let you know. I won't be courteous." Qiu Yunsan patted his chest. "Don't worry, boss. When the time comes, as long as boss says the word, we'll provide you with manpower, money, and strength. With a wave of his hand, Yun Yang led Fang Mafei and Lao Mei out the door, leaving behind a single word, "You guys play on your own for now." After a quarter of an hour, Yun Yang and the rest appeared in the south of the city, coming to a residential area that looked rather deserted. Every house in this area was very dilapidated. Although it was already late at night, when Chen San brought Yun Yang into the yard, they could still see 23 burly men standing up in an orderly fashion. These men, without exception, were all injured or disabled. Other than that, there were some old soldiers who were blind and had broken legs standing up as well. However, a few of them had broken legs and could not even stand properly, still leaning against the wall with a solemn expression on their faces. Indignation could hardly be concealed on these people's faces. "Young Master Yun is here." Chen San's voice was excited. "Young Master, please seek justice for us." Everyone knelt down in unison. "Everyone, get up quickly." Yun Yang felt a rush of warmth. "What is going on? Everyone, tell us first. Let us analyze the whole story, what is going on?" Under Yun Yang's beckoning, everyone quickly sat in a circle and began narrating the events that had transpired. Fang Mafei had already floated up to the roof. With Fang Mafei, a 7th peak pinnacle expert, as a lookout, it was already considered safe in a place like this. As the crowd continued to talk, Yun Yang gradually formed a general outline of the current strange situation. For 9 consecutive days, there had been a missing soldier every day, and all of them had gone missing from this area. Everyone was in the same trench, comrades who had gone through thick and thin together. It was only logical that they could understand each other and have a tacit understanding. However, amidst the crowd's discussion, Yun Yang unexpectedly realized that the 9 missing people were the closest to each other and had the most tacit understanding. No, to be more precise, other than the 9 of them, their relationship with the other old soldiers was only average. However, they were truly devoted to each other. There were still 2 people among the remaining people who were closest to them. At this moment, it was also these 2 who appeared to be the most anxious. In spite of this, Yun Yang had also confirmed from these 2 that although they were on good terms with the 9 missing people, it was still far from the friendship between the 9 of them. Disappearing mysteriously, Yun Yang's brows were tightly knitted together. One goes missing every day, but since the day before yesterday, no one has gone missing anymore. Chapter 120. Disappearances mostly happen to children or kidnappings and extortion of rich young masters and young ladies, but it rarely happened to adult men, especially these disabled soldiers who had nothing on them. They lived in extreme poverty and could barely maintain their food and clothing. Even if they kidnapped and blackmailed, and even if the blackmail was successful, how much profit could they get? What was even more ridiculous was the fact that 9 people had been kidnapped consecutively for 9 days. What kind of logic was this? Yun Yang's train of thought stopped abruptly. A thought flashed through his mind as his face turned pale. 9 days. 9 people. Why 9 days? Why were there 9 people? Yun Yang suddenly thought of a horrifying possibility. He thought about it with difficulty and said, "Everyone, go back first. If I'm not wrong, something like this shouldn't happen again." Chen San asked, "Young master, what do you mean?" Yun Yang heaved a long sigh. "There's something more to this incident. It should be related to a sinister arcane skill that requires 9 people to activate. I think I know the cause and effect of this. Honestly, I hope that I'm wrong. Otherwise, the consequences will be dire." He took out a parcel from his robe and opened it with some difficulty. It was filled with glistening yellow gold, but Yun Yang had never realized that the gold's color was so blinding. He said softly, "I'll have to trouble all of you to help settle the 9 brothers' families. Send these gold ingots over on my behalf." Dozens of men knelt on the ground simultaneously. Thank you, young master. On behalf of our missing brothers, we thank young master for your great kindness. Great kindness? Yunyang chuckled bitterly, his face full of despair. Could a few gold ingots really buy the life of a hero who had sacrificed his life for the country and its people? If it was possible, I, Yunyang, am willing to spend all my wealth to raid and plunder the world, to get as much gold as I can. However, he could not. How could these glistening gold ingots be equivalent to a hero's life? At most, they could only make up for his guilt. It was really just a token of his gratitude. Yunyang walked out of the desolate alley, feeling the rage within him shoot straight to his very soul. He took out the 9 heavens dictum almost without hesitation. This time, Yunyang used the real 9 heavens dictum. It was not the kind of token that the brothers used to have. This was the only token in the residence of 9 supremes. The token itself seemed to be surrounded by a faint purple light. Yunyang thought about it and took out his 7th brother Supreme Blood's token, pasting it on the 9 heavens dictum. Then, holding the orb of blood in his hand, he issued a direct command. Streaks of blood-like rays of light shot out from the 9 heavens dictum. Check. Have there been any disabled soldiers or soldiers in service who have gone missing? If they did, would they disappear for 9 consecutive days? 9 missing people? If there is such news, report it immediately without any delay. The blood-red light flashed and disappeared. On this very night. In countless places, countless people in countless secrets, all of them had tears streaming down their faces. Looking at the 9 heavens dictum that was shining with a pure blood-red light, countless people were overwhelmed with emotions. They were so excited that they could not speak. Supreme Blood Lord finally appeared again. This is the true 9 heavens command. Countless people leaped up and rushed up at an unprecedented speed to check the contents of the 9 heavens dictum. Immediately, everyone spread out and investigate. Go and investigate immediately. The faster the better. We must come up with the most detailed investigation results in the shortest time possible. Quick, quick, quick. Supreme Blood Lord's first command after his return. If we don't investigate thoroughly, we don't have to live to embarrass Supreme Blood Lord anymore. Quick. We must be quick. Everyone else is on the move. Our dictum of blood is the direct force of Supreme Blood Lord. If we fall behind the others, we can just commit suicide together. After Yunyang returned, the 9 heavens dictum was stuck to his chest. He could vaguely feel that there was a constant stream of news. From the messages, the agitation and anxiety of the messenger could be seen. Boss. Boss, you're back. Supreme Blood Lord, our boss, when will he be back? Supreme Blood Lord, our Water Lord, Supreme Blood Lord. Our Lord Yun, looking at the anxious and hopeful messages, Yunyang could completely feel the anxiety, urgency, and cautiousness on the messenger's face. Faced with such news, Yunyang felt like his heart was frying in oil, unable to deal with it. For a moment, he was in so much pain that his heart almost spasmed, unable to speak. Do your job well. Yunyang replied in unison. Looking at the deep night sky, Yunyang only wanted to roar at the top of his lungs and vent his frustration. However, after looking at it for a long time, he finally heaved a long, drawn-out sigh. It was only the wee hours of the morning when the 9 heavens dictum began to shine with news. Concentrated around Tiantang City's territory, there had been disappearances of battle-hardened soldiers since about 1.5 years ago. There had been a total of 3 incidents where 9 people had disappeared each time. The first time was 1.5 years ago. In the second month, 9 battle-hardened soldiers had gone missing in the west of Tiantang City. There was no news of them at all. The second time was after the 9th of the 3rd month last year. Starting from the 15th of the 3rd month, 9 battle-hardened soldiers had gone missing in the north of Tiantang City for 9 consecutive days. The third time was the current one, in the south of Tiantang City. The 3 disappearances had one thing in common: the 9 missing people were very close to each other. What each of them had in common was that they were veterans who had gone through hundreds of battles, veterans who had taken at least 3 lives in their hands. It's because of the 9 Supremes indeed. It's the spectral path of the soul, the abyss path of the flesh. Yunyang sucked in a deep breath and ordered once more, from today onwards, all forces are to focus on the east of Tiantang City. Once you discover the disappearance of the remaining soldiers, inform me immediately without delay. Once the order was given, Yunyang fell silent. The Four Seasons Tower had actually used such an extremely vicious method. The spectral path of the soul, the abyss path of the flesh, was an extremely vicious and unorthodox method of locating that was not very effective. Only when one wanted to find a person but was unable to do so, or even had a rough grasp of the person's location, would they use this most extreme and inefficient method. The efficiency of this method was not high, but the conditions for its implementation were not low at all. Perhaps, it should be said that it was extremely harsh. The first condition was to find 9 people who were very close to each other, and these 9 people had to be extremely loyal to the person you were looking for. Secondly, these 9 people had to have a fighting soul. The so-called fighting soul was the soul of the battlefield. In other words, only people who had been on a proper battlefield and were fearless on the battlefield could possess such a fighting soul. Having a fighting soul alone was not enough, one had to have a murderous aura as well. A person who was extremely vicious would have a murderous aura. He would have a murderous aura when he raided, even when he slaughtered pigs and cows. However, the murderous aura on the battlefield was not the usual kind of murderous aura. It was a kind of murderous aura that had been accumulated through hundreds of battles. Killing one enemy would remove the anxiety and fear. Killing 2 enemies would make one fearless and increase one's bravery. Killing 3 enemies would make one invincible, and the murderous aura would rise. This meant that when some battle-hardened soldiers returned to their hometowns from the battlefield, they would sometimes smile and greet people, but it would make people feel that they were afraid to approach them, afraid to get close to them, a sense of fear that would grow in their hearts. This was the murderous aura. The murderous aura was real. It would only disappear after a long period of peace. Only when all the above conditions were met could the spectral path of the soul and the abyss path of flesh be activated. Perhaps it should be said that the so-called spectral path of the soul and the abyss path of flesh was to throw the souls of such people into the altar and search for the location of the person they were looking for using an extremely evil arcane method. This method was very mysterious, but it was evil to the extreme, and the efficiency was extremely low. Yunyang had only heard of it in legends. Not only did he feel disdain towards such arcane methods, he even despised them. He had never thought that there would be a day when such an evil and heartless act would happen around him, and it was done to search for him. The love of life and death, the murderous army, the spectral path of the soul, the abyss path of flesh. The Four Seasons Tower. Yunyang uttered the 3 words word by word. They were like the ice shards of an ancient iceberg, chilling to the bone. Emmy, I want to go into closed-door cultivation. Yunyang was furious. Summon all the energy that you've been suppressing. I want to ascend to the 5th peak. Yunyang could no longer care about stabilizing his realm or solid foundation. All he wanted was to become more powerful. As long as his cultivation base broke through to the 5th peak of mystical chi, he could ascend to the 4th stage of mystique wind conjuration, the 5th stage of fog of cloud conjuration, and the 4th stage of fiery charm. He could also cultivate supreme blood and supreme thunder's cultivation methods at the same time. By then, his ability to maneuver would increase tremendously. He would be more confident and have more tricks up his sleeves when facing the Four Seasons Tower. It doesn't matter how you deal with me or the 9 Supremes. We'll just fight based on our own abilities. Yunyang was furious. But why do you want to kill the veterans? They're the heroes of the country, the heroes of the people. They fought for the country, not forgetting to serve the country even when they're handicapped. Each of them is a man of steel. Each of them deserves to be ashamed for 3 lifetimes. Yet you're so insane as to kill such heroic men to achieve your goals. I'll do as you wish. When I appear before you, don't blame me for being merciless. Yun Yang's eyes glinted with a murderous glint. Perhaps the Four Seasons Tower did not expect that it was because of their extreme methods that Yun Yang would make such a crazy decision. Perhaps it was just like the saying, heaven is watching what man does. Karma and reincarnation had to be repaid. Chapter 121. It was autumn now. The autumn wind gradually turned chilly. After an autumn rain, it added a sense of desolation to the atmosphere. The autumn wind howled above Tiantang City, not stopping for the entire day. Almost every Yutong citizen, especially those who were once in the military, could not help but lift their heads to look when they heard the howling wind. Sometimes, the sound of the wind is the movement of our God of Protectors, Supreme Wind, controlling the winds of the world. However, Tiantang's wind was howling all day long now. Where had the heroes of the past gone? 3 days later, early morning. Above Tiantang City, the howling of the wind could be heard. The autumn wind had come again. Fallen leaves fluttered in the air. Dust and fog filled the air. The wind today seemed to be much stronger than usual. Yun Yang came out from his closed-door cultivation in the secret chamber. With a sway of his body, he turned into a gust of wind and soared into the sky soundlessly, merging with the howling autumn wind in the sky. The autumn wind began to feel strange at once. The spectral path of the soul, the abyss of the flesh. Caused by the murderous aura, the resentment that surges to the heavens, the sinister wind and the fog of the soul have their origins. Where the evil exists, heaven has eyes. Yun Yang knew. Any person or organization that used such an extreme method would definitely be forsaken by heaven and man, hated by both gods and ghosts. This itself was an act that went against the natural order. Similarly, Yun Yang, who understood the enemy's sinister tricks, only needed to observe where the murderous aura was. The place with the heaviest yin qi would be his target. The autumn wind suddenly spun, forming a tornado in the air. At that moment, the fallen leaves that were drifting in the air of Tiantang City suddenly spun once again. They formed a pillar of tornado in the air that connected the sky and the earth. Then, the tornado changed its direction continuously. Such a situation had happened frequently in the past. Therefore, to the people, it was not strange at all. They all thought that it was just an ordinary weather phenomenon. The south of the city, as the tornado swept past, the falling leaves fluttered in the air like helpless butterflies. The south of the city was fine. It was a peaceful scene as far as the eye could see, there was no trace of murderous aura. Yun Yang continued to maintain the tornado as he headed towards the west of the city. Since the Four Seasons Tower had done so and left the east side of the city untouched, it seemed like the most suspicious point should be the east side of the city. However, Yun Yang understood that the east side of the city was where most of the defeated soldiers gathered and where the poor gathered. It was difficult to find a place to set up the bizarre sacrificial ritual of spectral path of soul, abyss path of flesh. The deeper reason was that the places with the deepest resentment were usually the rich people's districts or the officials' districts. And the places with the deepest resentment were the imperial cities and the royal palaces. It was the same for every country. No matter how enlightened the monarch was, the palace was still the place where the most grievances were concentrated. There were not many wealthy people in the east side of Tiantang City, most of them were gathered in the north, west, south, and center. The east side of the city had become the area with the least amount of resentment. When Yunyang had soared into the sky with the tornado earlier, he had already roughly surveyed the locations. Other than the palace in the center that was filled with resentment, the south, west, and north were the strongest. The east side of the city, on the other hand, was peaceful. Now, he only needed to comb through it slowly. Yunyang was not in a hurry, combing through it bit by bit. It was an arduous task. After more than an hour, the tornado disappeared. The autumn wind was still howling, but it had turned into a gust of wind in the west side of the city. All the streets and alleys had turned into air vents. Strong winds whistled through every alley, every narrow street, and every main street. The wind did not subside for a whole day and night. When Yunyang returned to the residence of Yun, his face was as pale as a sheet, like a ghost. He had only eaten a few mouthfuls of food and he had almost fallen asleep. He was truly exhausted. After a short rest, Yunyang entered the state of cultivation again. He had to persevere no matter how tired he was. Other than searching for the location of the murderous aura, his current mission was to cultivate. Only by greatly increasing his ability could he have the ability to handle the upcoming storm. In the middle of the night, the autumn wind blew again. For 3 consecutive days, the unprecedentedly violent autumn wind blew the streets of Tiantang City clean. Not even the dust could be seen. Why is it so strange this year? This autumn wind is endless. Yes, in the past, when the autumn wind blew during the day, it should have stopped at night, especially during the second half of the night. This year, however, the longer it gets, the more it sounds like a ghost wailing. It gives one goosebumps. That's right. I didn't pay much attention to it at first. It really is an evil wind. Among the crowd, a man with a cold expression did not join in the conversation. He only listened quietly, a hint of joy flashing in his eyes as he strode away. At a secret location. A few people sat in a circle with unusually solemn expressions while a few others were walking over quickly. Brothers, perhaps it's good news. What good news? The autumn wind has been blowing continuously these days. It's very uncanny. Don't you all think it's odd? Autumn wind. Do you mean? This autumn wind looks normal, but if you look at the past few years, it might not be very normal. The burly man who spoke had an excited expression on his face as he lowered his voice. We all know that Lord Blood appeared a few days ago, and issued an order. Actually, didn't Lord Wind and Lord Fire help in the previous battle? Although it said that it was the spirits of the 2 lords who had manifested to help, Qi Lao Lu, don't believe it. And the autumn wind is so strange now. The man called Qi Lao Lu seemed to be choked as tears welled up in his eyes. Could it be, our Lord Wind is making a move? When everyone heard this, their faces suddenly shook, and their eyes revealed expressions of surprise and joy. Calm down. The leader of the men looked calm as he hollered with a frown, why are you all so agitated? What we need now is patience, absolute patience, wait slowly. All of you, be patient. Do you still remember what the 9 lords said? The 9 heavens dictum will always exist. You're only starting to doubt now. The burly and steady man's voice couldn't help but tremble. His eyes were also sparkling and his lips were trembling. However, he pretended to be calm and laughed loudly. I have never believed that the 9 lords would die. Everyone, do your jobs. Everyone, do your jobs well. The steady man's gaze was cold. If anyone makes a mistake, and loses face for the lords. Don't blame me, Boss Xiao, for saying something unpleasant. What do you mean by saying something unpleasant? Everyone laughed together. If anyone makes a mistake, everyone will swarm up and beat him to death. Boss Xiao snorted and said, why is the 9 heavens dictum not in a mess when the 9 lords are missing? Because everyone believes that the 9 lords will definitely come back. Therefore, the more the bosses are not around, the more the people in the 9 halls have to compete with each other. They are all preparing their troops and all of them are doing proper things. We must not lose face for Master Feng. Most importantly, we must keep our mouths shut, act fast, and be secretive. Boss Zhao's gaze was as sharp as a knife. The 9 lords are unprecedented heroes, we must not lose this reputation. Yes. Everyone, dismiss. Boss Zhao stood up. Go back and keep an eye on your little bastards. If any of you make a mistake, even if we can't see it, we won't beat you to death. But ask your own conscience. Can you live with it? Do you have no face to live? The same conversation appeared in many secret places one after another. Now that Lord Shui has appeared, and now that the autumn wind is bewitching, I suspect that Lord Wind has also reappeared. Why is there still no news of our boss? But, the more it is like this, the more we need to be stable. If anyone makes Lord Wind lose face. I don't need to say it, everyone understands. Both Lord Wind and Lord Flame had fought at Tianxian Cliff, and now Lord Shui has reappeared. There has been no movement for such a long time, but now he has made such a big move. There must be a mastermind behind this. Our Lord Yun is known as the soul of the 9 supremes, he has always been a strategist. This method of deceiving the world and playing everyone in the palm of his hand is Lord Yun's doing. It's not that I'm arrogant, but other than our Lord Yun, even if the other bosses were to plan it themselves, they would never be able to do it. Our Cloud School must not be outdone by the other families. Stay stable, work hard. Lord Yun will be back. The residence of Marshal. Is it really Lord Wind who has returned? Old Marshal Chiu paced back and forth while the old woman watched as this old man had already walked dozens of miles in his own yard. Old Marshal, His Majesty has summoned you. I'll go right away. The old marshal did not even have time to change his clothes. He simply put on a large cloak and left the house on his horse. Yunyang continued to search and filter. Finally, he had chosen 11 locations, all of which he thought were the most likely targets. The palace was the first to bear the brunt as the air of resentment was the heaviest. It could be said to be the best place to perform the demonic spell. The second place was the execution ground, the place where the most wanted criminals were executed. This was the place where most people died in Tiantang City, and it was also the best place to perform the demonic spell. However, what surprised Yunyang was that the 3rd, 4th, and 5th places were, the Crown Prince's residence, the 3rd Prince's residence, and the 4th Prince's residence. Among the princes of this dynasty, other than the few who had yet to grow up, the residences of those who had grown up had the heaviest air of resentment. Even the lowest ranked one was ranked 9th. Chapter 122. Yunyang was a little dumbfounded by the outcome. What did these fellows do on a regular basis? There were 4 other places, the residence of the Grand Tutor, the residence of the Northern King, the residence of the Grand Commandant, and the residence of King Jing. Yunyang committed them to memory. Out of these 11 places, one of them had to be the target. However, the more he was certain of it, the more furious Yunyang became. The 11 suspects that he had identified were all people of high status and power. They were either members of the royal family or the families of the ministers who had the power to overturn the world. Thinking of this, Yunyang could not help but feel a deep sense of sorrow. All of you are in high positions, living in luxury, taking whatever you want. Don't you know that the wealth, status, comfort, and enjoyment you have are all exchanged with the lives of the warriors who have fought outside? Just when all of you are enjoying all of this with a clear conscience, there are still people who have colluded with the Four Seasons Tower to kill meritorious officials. They are truly heartless and insane. Sometimes, Yunyang even felt that he could not understand why such an act and such a thing would happen. Are you not Yutong's people? Furthermore, are you even human? How could a person be so shameless to this extent? Charge for the 5th peak tonight. Yun-yang gritted his teeth with a strong sense of resentment. Charge for the 5th stage of Fog of Cloud Conjuration and the 4th stage of Mystique Wind Conjuration. Tomorrow, I must find out who the culprit is. If it's really any one of these 9 people, I will destroy this person at all costs. Yun-yang did not suspect His Majesty, not at all. Out of everyone here, the one who had the least reason to do so was His Majesty the Emperor. However, his son might not be so. Spiritual qi surged in from all directions. For 3 consecutive days, Yun-yang had not completed his breakthrough. Emmy controlled the output of the qi of vitality precisely, allowing Yun-yang to stay on the edge of the breakthrough. However, he was just a little short, unable to break through. As for Yun-yang, he had transformed into the wind for the past few days, squeezing his mystical qi to the limit every day to ensure that his mystical qi had been depleted to its limit before he returned. Therefore, he was as tired as a dead dog when he returned, unable to even stand properly. In spite of this, Yun-yang felt that he had improved tremendously each time he recovered from the extreme exhaustion and exhaustion. Under such extreme exhaustion and extreme training that kept him on the edge of a breakthrough, Yun-yang's cultivation base was further stabilized and strengthened. However, Yun-yang did not want to drag it out any longer. Forceful breakthrough. Emmy was helpless as well. According to Emmy's opinion, it would take at least another day to maintain the extreme exhaustion and the training on the edge of a breakthrough. It would be more appropriate to ensure that it could recover its energy 5 to 6 times at the very least. However, as its owner, Yun-yang had spoken, Emmy could only do as he was told. Other than the surging mystical energy that gathered from the sky, there was also an even purer and surging spiritual energy that surged out from the green vines. Yun-yang could only feel the quaking barrier of the 5th peak crumbling almost instantaneously. Countless stars appeared before his eyes as if a universe had suddenly exploded in his mind. Although his eyes were closed, he could still feel the heaven and earth collapsing abruptly, followed by a sea of vibrant colors. That feeling, Yun-yang suddenly felt that his horizons had been broadened. It was as if some things had been right before his eyes, but he had turned a blind eye to them, unable to notice them no matter what. It was only after breaking through the current level that he realized that he had neglected so much. It was an exceptionally wonderful feeling. Once he thought about it, Yun-yang could not help recalling what Supreme Earth, who had the highest cultivation base among his brothers, had once said, only when one breaks through the 5th peak and sees the 5th heaven can he feel that he's actually just a frog at the bottom of a well. Before breaking through to the 5th heaven, he won't even have the self-awareness to know that he's a frog at the bottom of a well. When Yun-yang had heard this, he had only smiled, wondering if his boss was exaggerating a little too much. However, it was only today that he understood it after experiencing it for himself. This sentence was the truth. Some of them were even incomplete. 5th peak, Yun-yang had only experienced the novelty for less than a quarter of an hour before he began to meditate again. Fog of Cloud Conjuration, Mystique Wind Conjuration, Fiery Charm. He began to cultivate. Yun-yang was racing against time. He had to elevate his cultivation base, ability, and mystical skill in the shortest amount of time possible. He had to charge forward courageously. Cultivation, other than being his true asset to protect himself, was also. Yun-yang felt that he could be closer to his brothers in the cultivation atmosphere, and he could feel the closeness when they were still together. The breakthrough of the Fog of Cloud Conjuration was a natural process for Yun-yang. The breakthrough of the Mystique Wind Conjuration was not that difficult either. When his cultivation base had reached the required level, he would naturally break through. However, the progress of the Fiery Charm's cultivation was entirely different from the other two. Even when his cultivation base was sufficient, it would still take a considerable amount of time to break through to the original level. Up until midnight, the Fiery Charm still had not broken through to the 4th stage. However, Yunyang was already very satisfied with his current progress. Now that his cultivation base had reached the 5th peak, he could already be considered an expert. Well, comparatively speaking, that was indeed the case. The 5th peak of mystical Qi was the beginning of the 5th heaven, the 5th stage of fog of cloud conjuration was the beginning, the 4th stage of mystique wind conjuration was the same level as supreme wind back then. This level was enough. It was enough to deal with the current situation. Yunyang, whose cultivation base and ability had improved tremendously, floated out gleefully. The residence of Crown Prince. The Crown Prince was still fuming over the disappearance of Shui Yuehan. After Shui Yuehan's disappearance, the 4 noble families of spring, summer, autumn, and winter had been coming to pick a fight. His Highness, who was already under house arrest, was not in a good mood. He had been pressured time and time again, yet he had no choice but to speak nicely to them. Naturally, his mood had worsened, and he was already feeling extremely aggrieved. This Shui Yuehan. I don't understand. How could such a smart person do such a stupid thing? Thinking about it now, His Highness was infuriated. He would have been fine by daybreak, but he broke out of the prison and escaped before daybreak? Did he really need half a night's time? His Highness's handsome face was filled with conflict and anger. Isn't this just looking for trouble? Your Highness. A white-haired, kind-looking elder beside the Crown Prince mused for a moment before speaking softly, this old and useless one has a different opinion on this matter. Crown Prince, huh? It's been some time since the incident. The elder spoke slowly. If Shui Yuehan wasn't dead, he should have informed us, but he didn't. We would never betray him, nor would we simply hand him over. Shui Yuehan has always been loyal to the Crown Prince's residence for so many years, and he's quite intelligent as well. There's really no reason for him to do such a thing. The white-bearded elder said faintly, therefore, this old and useless one thinks that Shui Yuehan is most likely dead. He was already dead before the news of the prison break spread. The one who created the illusion of a prison break was someone else. And that Fu Guansan should be dead as well. All of this is a ploy by someone with ulterior motives. The white-bearded elder looked mournful as he said, otherwise, there's no way to explain everything. Taking a step back, even if Shui Yuehan really did break out of the prison, there's no need for him to ambush those popinjays. That would be the real problem of creating new problems. If he really wanted to flee for his life, why would he offend the spring, summer, and winter families? You must know that attacking the 3 of them at that moment was equivalent to sowing irreconcilable enmity with the 3 families. The so-called mercy was just a smokescreen. If one were to think deeper, it would not be difficult to understand. No, it was a ploy to further deepen the enmity between Shui Yuehan and the popinjays, completely crushing the enmity between both parties. The Crown Prince's face gradually turned pale. Dead? Are there no other possibilities? The white-bearded elder said confidently, it's most likely so. Shui Yuehan and Han Wufei were sworn brothers. They were so close that it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they'd gone through life and death together. Both of them had roamed the martial world for many years before coming to serve under your highness. If Shui Yuehan wasn't dead, he would have told Han Wufei even if he was hesitant to tell us. On the side, the handsome Han Wufei wore a sorrowful expression. Brother Shui must have been murdered. Your Highness, please help Brother Shui. You can't let him die unjustly and bear this inexplicable stain. That's a huge crime for a prison break. The Crown Prince sat down slowly and said, if Shui Yuehan really died in the Board of Punishments, then who was the one who did it? The white-bearded elder sat in silence, his eyes looking at the other strategists. However, the others did not say anything. Instead, they all stared at him. There was only one meaning in their words: continue speaking. This old man will just say it to get the ball rolling. Please add on later. The white-bearded elder smiled helplessly and said, as for who killed Shui Yuehan and Fu Guansan, this old man thinks that there are only a few targets on the surface. The group perked up when they heard the elder. The third prince's side is undoubtedly the most suspicious. Shui Yuehan was an important person in the crown prince's residence. His death would definitely be a huge blow to the residence's strength. Moreover, after this matter, the crown prince will be in conflict with the Ministry of Justice, and will form enmity with the Spring, Autumn, and Winter clans. He will make many strong enemies for no reason, while the third prince's side will not be exposed at all. He will perfectly stay out of this matter. Of course, the fourth prince, the fifth prince, and the sixth prince might have done the same. The reason why the third prince is the most suspicious is that he's currently favored by the emperor. Once His Highness the Crown Prince loses power, he'll benefit the most. Apart from the princes, there are also the people from the four great clans. Even the two old marshals of the military are suspects. Perhaps I should put it this way, as long as it's a person or force that benefits from this incident, they're all suspects. The only difference is how suspicious they are and how much they can benefit from it. Only the Ministry of Penalty, which is at the center of the whirlpool in this case and is also under great pressure right now, is the least suspicious. Chapter 123. As he spoke, the crowd nodded in agreement, deep in thought. However, other than the people on the surface, I have another suspicion. The white-bearded elder paused for a moment before saying faintly, I suspect that this could be the doing of the 9 Supremes. 9 Supremes? Everyone was stunned at the same time. The Crown Prince's expression changed as well as he asked hurriedly, why do you say so? There was a hint of hesitation on the white-bearded elder's face as he said, this old and useless one is only guessing. There's no evidence to speak of. Therefore, it's only a guess. The Crown Prince's expression sank slowly, his gaze flickering with a complicated and indecipherable meaning. After a while, the Crown Prince suddenly said in a low voice, if the 9 Supremes' forces are really involved, why would they be involved in this? There must be a reason. Also, what benefits can they gain from this? No one could answer the Crown Prince's question. If they were to continue thinking about it, the consequences would be too horrifying. The final extension of this theory did not mean that the 9 Supremes were targeting the Crown Prince. Let's put this theory aside for now. After all, there's no evidence or sign that the 9 Supremes are really involved in this matter, the Crown Prince murmured, as if trying to console himself. The white-bearded elder said with a smile while stroking his beard, it's good to put it aside for now. After all, this is just this old and useless one's feeling. I don't have any evidence myself. In terms of suspicion and related benefits, the 9 Supremes are indeed the least suspicious. However, the more he said so, the more anxious the Crown Prince felt. Had the 9 Supremes really made a move? The 9 Supremes never seemed to focus on benefits when they did things. The so-called least suspicious was meaningless. Similar secret conversations took place almost every day in the residences of the princes. All sorts of guesses were made, but it was still difficult to come to a conclusion. After all, how could there be truth without concrete evidence? However, for some reason, all the discussions would stop when they reached the level of the 9 Supremes. Silence reigned. A gust of autumn wind blew in the sky. Yunyang had searched every corner of the 10 targets, but he still could not find any trace of them. He was not discouraged, instead, he became more serious. It would be strange if he could find out the Four Seasons Tower's meticulous setup so easily. To deal with the Four Seasons Tower, patience was required. Just as he was about to return to the residence of Yun after completing his search for the day. Suddenly, he felt something, an abnormally powerful aura seemed to appear behind him on his right, but it disappeared in a flash. Yunyang immediately felt that something was amiss. Instinctively, he moved towards the direction of the breeze. Autumn was high and the clouds were light. The autumn wind blew. The government's meeting for the day had ended. The white-bearded old man staggered out of the room. Han Wufei followed behind him. "I'll send old He back, and also to thank old He for speaking up for my brother's sake and generosity tonight." Elder He chuckled and said in a doddering manner, "Then I'll have to trouble you, Lord Han. This old man is indeed a little tired. I can also chat with Lord Han along the way. The atmosphere in the conference hall is a bit heavy after all." Hearing their words, the Crown Prince dispelled the idea of having someone escort them. He then said, "If that's the case, I wish the two of you a safe journey. Have a good night." In reality, the Crown Prince was exhausted as well, but he had to maintain his courteous demeanor. Seeing that everyone had left, he subconsciously yawned and went back to rest. Both old He and Han Wufei walked out of the residence of Crown Prince and walked slowly along the street in silence. Under the starlight, the age spots on old He's face could be seen clearly. His legs seemed to be trembling as he walked. He had one foot in the grave, it was obvious. After a long time, when they arrived in front of the old He's door, Han Wufei finally spoke in a low voice, "Old He, isn't it too early to bring up the topic of the 9 Supremes now?" Old He's gaze glinted as he replied faintly, "Han Wufei." The 3 words were uttered with a pause. The old man exuded an imposing aura. Although it was fleeting, the domineering aura made Han Wufei break out in cold sweat and shiver. It was the sudden appearance of this powerful aura that alerted Yunyang, who was in the air. Yes, it is this subordinate's fault. However, this subordinate still thinks that if we bring up this matter to the Crown Prince now, the disadvantages outweigh the advantages. We don't have proof after all. Han Wufei explained hurriedly, "If we're not careful, we might alert the enemy instead." The gentle autumn breeze blew across the sky, leaving no trace as it passed. The white-bearded elder said faintly, "You don't have to worry about this, I have." Halfway through his words, old He suddenly paused. A massive aura like an erupting volcano rose abruptly as he lifted his head and hollered, "Come down." 2 words. It was like 2 claps of thunder in the clear sky. His bony palm flipped and struck towards the sky. Countless sharp gusts of wind swept out, instantly forming layers of sharp forces that looked like an inescapable net, suddenly flying towards the sky. Not only was old He's attack ferocious, the range of his attack was even wider, enveloping an area of over 30 meters. With a hum, even the autumn wind in the sky seemed to have been dispersed by the palm. An extremely deep and sinister black hole had appeared in the sky at the moment of his attack. It was as if it could devour everything in this world. The extreme eeriness and terror was spreading from the black hole. The autumn wind was extinguished, but it was still there, barely discernible in the sky. The cool autumn air was still refreshing. No matter how strong a man was, how could he extinguish the wind of nature? Old He stood in front of the door for a full quarter of an hour with an unprecedentedly serious expression. His ears were constantly paying attention to the movements in the air. After a long time, a suspicious look appeared in his eyes. He snorted and said, "Isn't it?" When old He made his move, Han Wufei had swiftly taken 3 steps back as well. His entire body was like an arrow on a bowstring, ready to shoot out at any time and attack with all his might. At the same time, when old He retracted his aura, Han Wufei came over again and asked in a low voice, "Old He, did you find anything?" Old He frowned, his gaze still roaming the sky as he said softly, "It's strange. I felt that there was an unusual change in the sound of the wind just now. There was even a subtle feeling of being watched. To be safe, I immediately made my move to test it out, but I didn't find anything out of the ordinary." Han Wufei's heart skipped a beat, his voice even softer as he said, Old He, do you mean Supreme Wind? The word was so soft that it was almost inaudible. To be able to spy on someone at such a close distance without leaving any trace, it could only be Supreme Wind's secret art of wind. Old He frowned and kept quiet for a while, his expression growing darker as he said, "If Supreme Wind isn't dead, then it wasn't an illusion that I sensed just now." Han Wufei's expression changed. Never underestimate the power of their special technique. Old He's face was solemn. In the future, you must be more careful in everything you do. Think about what you say and do before you act. If you can't act, then don't act. Do you understand? Unless there's a day when it's absolutely safe. Old He's eyes that seemed to be blurry from old age were now dark and deep, like the evil black hole that had appeared earlier. Yes. In the future, no matter where you are, don't mention these words if you don't have to. Old He warned again. Yes. Old He still did not enter, standing at the door with his arms behind his back, deep in thought with a frown. His eyes would look up at the sky from time to time, as if waiting for something. After a long, long time, when even Han Wufei felt tired from standing, Old He finally said, "It seems like we should go back." With a flick of his sleeves, he turned and entered the residence. Only then did Han Wufei feel as if he had been pardoned. He bowed with cupped hands and turned to leave quickly. After walking another few feet, he activated his movement skill and disappeared at the end of the road like a wisp of green smoke. The sound of the wind was still soft, as if it could blow endlessly in the air. After a long while, Old He's frail body appeared at the door again, looking up without moving for a long time. After a long time, only when dawn broke in the east and a sliver of white appeared on the horizon, did Old He finally turn around and slowly walk back into the mansion. He was still muttering to himself, or rather, he was talking to someone. "Lord Supreme Wind, if you're not dead, this old man will burn incense to thank the heavens. Yutong is in danger and the other countries of the continent are eyeing us. We really can't do without the 9 sirs." His voice was sincere. It was like an old man with one foot in the grave was praying sincerely to the heavens, making his most cherished wish. The sky was slowly brightening. Fang Mafei and Lao Mei were cultivating diligently in the residence, concentrating on improving themselves. Suddenly, a loud thud could be heard as a person fell from the sky. Fang Mafei was shocked, rushing forward like a flash of lightning to catch the person who had fallen. The person was dressed in purple robes. It was none other than Yun Yang. However, Yun Yang's face was pale as a sheet, his breaths coming in and out of breath. He looked like he could breathe his last at any time. Even his pupils were dilated. After seeing Fang Mafei's face clearly, Yun Yang finally heaved a sigh of relief. Suddenly, he opened his mouth and spat out 7 to 8 mouthfuls of blood. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.